One or two empty chairs for councillors at the moment. Ordinarily, we wouldn't delay at all, but we're just aware there may be an issue on the A6, which is holding somebody up. In the interests of ensuring that as many members are able to partake, not just in the discussion, but in the voting as well, I am minded to wait 2 or 3 further minutes. I'm afraid we are going to be in for quite a long session tonight as well. Anyway, please do avail yourself of the cold water from the fountain outside if you get a chance, okay? Meeting because there's a lot of speakers, which is right, that's as it should be. And I'm sure the councillors here tonight will also want to pose questions and enter into a debate. So you'll have to bear with us. If you want to dip out into the meeting room as members of the public next door, you can also watch it on that. So don't feel you have to be in here. I'm not saying it's any cooler in there though, I'm afraid. So there's a single topic for discussion at tonight's meeting, which is the draft local plan. I just wanted to lay out what the purpose of the meeting is before we get into that and before you get a chance to say the things that you want to say, all of which are valid. The purpose of the meeting, regardless of the views of individual councillors, which they may hold quite strongly, and yourselves, is to discuss the process by which we agree that the draft plan goes out for consultation. So there's already been, as you'll hear in a few minutes, various parts of consultation on this already, and that will continue kicking off in the summer. So that means that any submissions that people have put in, including things that you say tonight, are valid and they are being considered by officers. But in order for them to be considered by the planning inspector, you will need to resubmit those at the right time. And the right time kicks off from the 3rd of August, which is, as you'll learn throughout the meeting tonight, when the official public consultation starts on the local plan. So I just wanted to make that clear. This is not necessarily an opportunity to change individual lines within the local plan. It's a chance for you to have your say, and then, as I say, to consider whether or not you want to resubmit those comments at the appropriate time in the summer. So I just wanted to make that clear. There's a number of members of the team here that I just wanted to introduce, just in case you're not aware of who they all are. On this upper table here, we have Councillor David Hughes at the far end there. He is the Vice Chair of the Local Plan Committee. And next to him is Councillor Peter O'Brien, who is the Chair of the Local Plan Committee. Then we have Councillor Joe Linthwaite, Councillor Lucy Peacock, myself, I'm Roger Shelley, I'm Chair of the Council. We have Christine Lim, who is Principal Solicitor, Paul Wilson, Chief Executive, and John Ramsey, who's from the Democratic Services team. There are other members of the council team. There's Anna and Emily here as well, who've been involved in the local plan process, and they're taking notes as well. And then down on the tables beneath, we have Matt Bowers and Esther Lindley. So they are heading up the council's local plan team. So that's who we are. John, have we got apologies for absence, please?
Through you, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Jeff Bond, Councillor Matt Buckler, Councillor David Burton, Councillor Sue Bull, Councillor Steve Flitter, Councillor Helen Froggatt, Councillor Gareth G, Councillor Dawn Greterex, Councillor Peter Slack, and Councillor Steve Wayne. Thank you.
We now move on then to public participation, which is where you get a chance to have your say if you're registered to make a statement. We have a number of speakers. You each have 3 minutes from when you're comfortable at the table there. And could we have, first of all, please, Roger Flint from Tansley Parish Council. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
That's right, Roger. If you when you sit down, if you press the right hand button, I think it should come on.
That starts it. Good evening. You've heard who I am, but Tansley is a small doomsday village which has already assimilated some 150 new houses over the past 4 years. It's now being asked to accept a further 200 houses, effectively doubling its 2017 size, but without any enhancement of its infrastructure. All new housing is required to be both viable and sustainable, as set out in section 18. And I would dispute, for entirely practical reasons, the viability of the Jack Hill site. The site was first considered in 2022 and rightly rejected as being undevelopable due to its landlocked location and the nature of its topography. Since then, nothing has changed, except that last year, during heavy rains, water uncontrollably cascaded from the site down Spout Lane, destroying the tarmac roadway, and from a separate runoff, cut a deep trench down the ropeway and discharged into Green Lane, causing further alarm and chaos. The Jack Hill site contains a number of spring-lined watercourses, and as such, it has long been considered unsuitable for building. To cover the site with housing will only further exacerbate the runoff problem and result in even more damage to the village. The insurability of any properties built on it is also questionable in view of the recent evidence of uncontrolled runoff. Further, without safe access to the A615, development would not be possible. Highways have already intimated that such an access is at best problematical. It also needs to be designed to be adoptable and to cater for traffic load estimated at 1,200 vehicle movements per day when fully developed. The availability of fresh water within the village has become an immediate and increasing problem. To meet the current demands, Severn Trent are having to top up their Sunnyside reservoir on a regular basis, and it's reported that 18 tanker loads of fresh water are now being imported each week. This clearly is not sustainable, and further housing load cannot be imposed on the system until additional supply pipes have been installed. I would therefore respectfully suggest that in view of these facts, the Jack Hill site remains undevelopable, and I would therefore ask that it be withdrawn from the plan and the current planning application for the development of part of the site be considered to be inadmissible until the problems of access and uncontrollable drainage discharge across the whole site have been successfully addressed. Thank you.
Perfect timing, thank you. Could we have Joe Woods, who is a local resident, please? Yeah, and could we have Vicky Rains ready on standby, please?
It's ready. Okay.
You can sit down if you want to. You might be
No,
closer.
no,
You might be
no,
closer to the
I prefer to
microphone.
stand.
It's a question of whether people
The
can hear
microphone
it
can hear.
necessarily. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I better sit down then. I do prefer to stand.
Yes, 3 minutes.
Okay. Chair, councillors, I've got 6 points to put you tonight about Jack Hill Farm. As our local councillors elected to represent us, the people of Derbyshire Dales, you must take our views into account when making your decisions. Number one, by any definition, anybody's definition, Jack Hill Farm is a greenfield site. It's pristine, actively farmed land. It's still used for cow pasture, making silage, and it's been farmed for generations. Your own SLH assessment said the first fields in this proposal are undevelopable. Your policy states the draft plan ensures high quality landscapes, green spaces, and areas of countryside will be retained. Jack Hill Farm is all of these. Over the last 5 years, this is number 2, sorry. Over the last 5 years, Tansley has had exponential growth of new housing, over 160 houses, but there have been no additional resources or facilities. Number 3, are you fully aware that Severn Trent last year discharged untreated sewage into the River Derwent 1,971 times? This is an average of 5.4 discharges per day of untreated effluent. As far as I can find, there is no formulated plan from Severn Trent to stop this, never mind a plan to manage the sewage from an additional 150 houses. The proposed entrance and egress onto the 615 was rejected as too dangerous for use by 5 houses in 1996. Traffic levels have vastly increased. This proposal would potentially put 300 vehicles onto an extremely busy main road. Number 5, the transport plan put forward by the developer is not based on any reality. There are huge discrepancies in it, but I'll only use one as an example. I'm an experienced cyclist averaging over 2,000 miles per year, and I will not cycle up the cliff. It's too narrow, too dangerous and steep, over 13% in places. I tried it as an experiment before this meeting last Tuesday afternoon and was overtaken by 2 articulated lorries, a coach, a bus, a lorry, a cement mixer and countless cars and vans. I ask you as councillors to try and do that on your bike with your shopping. Political targets shift. This is the last point. Political targets shift as easily as the wind. I read yesterday the new Environment Minister announced they will seek to rebuild trust with farmers and rural communities. If this Jackhill is allowed, that's not rebuilding trust. I fully understand you're faced with a target of numbers,
Could you
but
bring
I
your
urge
conclusion?
you to stand up and be counted as our representatives and to follow your policy. Above all, look into your consciences and do what is truly right for the countryside, the people of the Dales and our future by taking Jackhill Farm out of the plan. Thank you.
So we have Vicky Rains next from Tansley Parish Council, and after that it will be Alan Smith, who is a local resident. Vicky, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, good evening, Council. Tonight you're being asked to move this draft local plan to Regulation 19, but the recommendation 2 of the agenda says this is subject to finalisation of the sustainable appraisal, habitats regulation and remaining evidence base. To legally initiate Regulation 19, you must prepare and display a complete set of submission documents. You cannot lawfully initiate it on a plan that is, by your own admission, incomplete. The complete plan needs ratifying. This council intends to lock in site allocations in Tansley while submitting crucial data on freshwater availability and foul water system capacity, unresolved highways issues related to gradient access and sustainability, a lack of community consultation related to the Derbyshire Dales Design Code, a lack of consultation statement to include the main issues raised by consultation and how those representations have shaped Regulation 19 draft. The Council have failed to put before the public a Regulation 18, the Environment Agency commissioned hydraulic modelling study of the Bentley Brook, the watercourse that cuts through both Tansley development zones and highlights the risk of flooding along the A615. The report indicates a flood warning area running directly alongside Jackhill's site on the A615. The agency's own engineers warned assessment excludes surface water and sewer flooding. Severn Trent have informed the Parish Council that a holding tank at Jackhill may be needed before foul water can enter the system. Derbyshire Dales have no available evidence to ensure capacity prior to site selection. It would appear the developer at Jackhill has already preempted the plan process, submitting an application for 33 dwellings and commencing engineering work already with the removal of trees and the beginning to make an extenuation pond before the plan to even move forward to Regulation 19. Highways have already raised concerns about the gradient, access and sustainability of Jackhill site in their response to 33. There is no apparent response from Derbyshire Dales to the 150 in the evidence base. The planning inspector advice 2025 to this council was clear. Engagement with infrastructure providers must be robustly evidenced because it will be tested at examination. Pushing forward a plan without vital assessments would suggest you have failed in your duty to cooperate robustly with infrastructure providers. When the plan reaches the independent planning inspector, it will face an immediate challenge because local concerns were ignored and vital infrastructure data was knowingly omitted. I request once again the removal of Jackhill Farm from the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Alan, if you would like to take the seat. And I'm not sure that Councillor Nick Adams is here. Is he here? No. Okay. In which case, Angela Colmar would be next. Alan, over to you. You've got 3 minutes. If you press I think it's the left-hand button on that's it. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. I'm a resident of Tansley with a background in town planning and economic regeneration. I'm not anti-development, but arguing against this proposed scale of development, particularly the greenfield site that is Jack Hill Farm. My statement's in 3 parts. The definition of a sustainable community: is Tansley sustainable as a community, and why that's important to you today. I've got a list of things that I argue makes Tansley unsustainable, and that list is quite long, so I'll leave that last because I know you'll cut me off. So essentially a community that meets the current and future daily needs of its residents with a range of essential public services and necessary supporting infrastructure. That's my view of a sustainable community. Using the Sustainable Development Commission 10-point checklist helps gauge if Tansley is a sustainable community. And that's my long list of things, but I don't believe any of those points on that list show that Tansley is a sustainable community. Tansley is actually serving as a satellite village to Matlock and arguably to Chesterfield as well. By no existing recognised measure of sustainability can Tansley be judged as a sustainable community. It relies on Matlock and Chesterfield and therefore generates many daily private car journeys. Although your council has designated Tansley as a Tier 3 settlement, in my view, that does not make it sustainable. So why is this significant to you today in your decision? Various national, regional, local planning policy documents make it clear that there should be a presumption for development only if that development is sustainable. These include the National Planning Policy Framework and the update of the same, your own emerging local plan and your existing local plan. In the last 5 years, you've already heard there's been a massive growth in households already, which generates more private car journeys, exacerbates traffic pressures, particularly in Matlock and beyond, and places a greater strain on public services that are already in jeopardy and existing infrastructure that is failing. If you approve these 2 development sites, particularly the larger of the 2, this will double the size of the village since the 2021 census. This scale of growth of any settlement is simply unsustainable without massive investment in public transport, infrastructure and core services, which is clearly, in my view, not going to happen anytime soon. Have I got a little?
You have another 30 seconds.
Right, so the long list of things that make it unsustainable, I'll just pick randomly. The primary school is nearly at capacity already. Local authority resources have had to be cut for obvious reasons in the last number of years, which has had a massive effect on your services that are delivered in Tansley as it is. There's no viable public transport provision to and from places of employment. There's no significant local employment that you could walk to. Brookfield Industrial Estate from these 2 sites is a 15 or 20-minute walk. There's very few local facilities. There's no shops, newsagent, etc.
Okay.
You've already heard cycling to and from Matlock's very unsafe, even though I tried to get here safely today on a bike.
Thank you. What I would say is, even though you haven't been able to read all these out now, please do consider submitting them as part of the consultation, the official consultation that starts with the inspector in August. So they won't be wasted.
Right, thank you.
So next we've got Angela Colmar, thank you, and Martin Spencer after Angela, please. It's the button on the left, if that's okay.
Can I just apologise in advance if there's some repetition?
So the left-hand button there in front of you. That's it. Yep. 3
Good
minutes.
evening. Both national and local policy documents on housing use vocabulary such as net zero, sustainable infrastructure, retention of quality landscapes and green spaces. These words and phrases cover complex issues. It can be difficult to know what you can do to have a positive impact. I'm saying to you tonight that you can make a positive step by removing Jack Hill Farm from the revised plan. As you've heard, Jack Hill Farm is an active agricultural virgin site. If you read, which I'm sure you have done, all the submitted documents supporting the inclusion of Jack Hill Farm, you will be aware of the many inconsistencies, omissions, lack of clarity and bias in the reports. In response to the application for 33 houses and the potential inclusion of 150 houses in the local plan, in a very short time, local people have lodged over 100 letters of objection. These letters vary from emotional pleas not to destroy local nature and footpaths to detailed analysis on why every aspect of this potential site will cause additional stress, damage to the environment, wildlife, sewage, sustainability, flood risk. The list goes on, and most importantly, the well-being of the people of Tansley. If you have time, you must read them all, as I have done. Their message is very powerful. Everybody agrees there is a national need for social and affordable housing. However, as you've heard, Tansley has already had 160 homes in 5 years, and the absence of social and affordable housing is obvious. There is none, or very little. By removing Jack Hill Farm now from the plan, you will save taxpayers' money and yourself time. We know that you've worked hard to put together a credible housing plan. We recognise that your job is made even more difficult by a large proportion of the land being within the Peak Park and numbers of housing not being linked to local housing needs or economics. However, we urge you to look at other options. Possibly penalties on greenfield sites to make the many existing grey brownfield sites more attractive. Go back to the government with strong and clear evidence of what you have already done to attempt to fill the housing need. If Jack Hill Farm is not removed from the revised local plan, you will appear to be seen to support the get-rich-quick scheme of a local farmer developer. As elected members, you must follow your own local and national principles to protect green spaces and listen to the views of local people. Follow your conscience and do what you know is right in your heart and mind by voting to remove Jack Hill Farm from the plan. Thank you.
So Martin, you're on your way over, and following you, it's John Ewart.
Thank you.
It's the left-hand button again.
Good evening. As a resident of Green Road, Ashbourne, I'm very concerned at the proposed building of 88 new houses on a greenfield site off the Green Road. I feel that doing so will have an adverse effect on the total infrastructure of the town, also resulting in more vehicle movement and bottlenecks. Since in the recent past, greenfields have been built on, resulting in sizable housing, such as the Manor Road estate, and increased traffic movement beyond all expectations. Any further housing of the proposed number, I think, would present a great problem, not only in the immediate area, but for the town, as most of the traffic will inevitably have to make its way through Ashbourne. However, a serious problem exists. In several places from the exit point of the proposed housing site, the pavement leading down towards town is very narrow. In fact, 90 centimetres or slightly less in a couple of cases, including some places on the other side of the road as well. It seems very unlikely or maybe impossible that any off-site highway mitigation could take place. While a 90 centimetre footway may exist as a legacy infrastructure, the National Planning Policy Framework and Local Highway Authority mandate that new developments must demonstrate safe and suitable access for all users. Adding the pedestrian volume of 88 homes, potentially 200 plus residents, including children, pushchairs, to a busy road, creates a severe highway safety risk. Furthermore, a 90 centimetre footway cannot accommodate a wheelchair, mobility scooter, double pram, and so on. Also, two pedestrians cannot pass each other without one stepping on the highway. To make this development permissible, the local authority will usually demand that the developer enters into a Section 278 agreement, Highway Act 1980. This legally binds the developer to fund and execute work on the public highway to resolve the issue. Looking at the frontage of the properties along this section of the Green Road, I do not think it would be possible to widen the footway at all to the required 2 metres or anywhere near that. Also, I think it's very unlikely that a busy road such as that could be reduced in width at all. Having said all that, I realise, as most people do, that the District Council are given housing targets by the government. However, on this occasion, I strongly think that this application from the developers should not be given approval by yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, John, you're on next, and then we have Mark McGowan after John.
Is it ready to go?
Indeed.
Thank you. Good evening, all. This is about using the woodyard for travellers now. Firstly, in the English planning system, I do not need consent of the landowners to contribute to land use issues. I'm a resident and taxpayer. The local councils and police have spent hundreds of thousands of pounds achieving nothing. Secondly, the long-term owners did not need to charge £40,000 for entry. LPA officers have a right to enter. I was in constant touch with the long-term owners via FaceTime, discussing how to deal with conditions of that permission, including, vitally, the proposal that one tenant would be a site manager. They cut me off suddenly, probably because I challenged the 40k income, which would have been vital to them. Thirdly, I was proud, as the long-term owner's planner, to gain permission for 8 permanent pitches. That permit is, of course, only the start point. To comply with its duty, your duty, as an LPA, you have to provide physically. So I'm pleased to note the allocation of the woodyard for travellers in the new local plan. I also note the allocation of Watery Lane site. I was first engaged long ago when 100 allotment owners were concerned at its approval, supported by the Town Council. There are 5 reasons why that site is inappropriate and won't be available. No traveller family has occupied it. So the pressure is on the woodyard. Excuse me. The first step, which is open to you any time now, is to occupy that site on a temporary basis. You have the permission. The landowners would, I'm sure, agree a sensible arrangement, and that's what should happen. The second step is to achieve permanent occupation. That will be a lot more difficult. It astounds me that senior planners, in-house or consultants, fail to realise the ready availability of composting systems to get rid of wastewater. That's just extraordinary. As regards water supply, as planning advisor, I have listened to the client. They know the site better than anybody. They assured me that under the duty to supply, they were confident that they could or can negotiate a supply. Sadly, they never had access to the ARC report, so they weren't able to challenge it. I've just been told that as we speak, the new entrance is now under construction. Perhaps you should check whether or not that's in order and whether the local housing authority has been informed. So finally, please engage positively. Get this site occupied temporarily, and then further down the road, get it occupied permanently. Please.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So Mark, you're next, and then we have Nicholas Clement. Three minutes.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors. My name is Mark McGowan and I'm speaking on behalf of the Green Road community. We're here tonight because approving the land behind 120 the Green Road, Ashbourne, policy HC2(EE) into this local plan is a dangerous mistake. It is physically unsafe, bad for the town, bad for the environment and completely unworkable. The proposed allocation for 88 houses is in all likelihood just a foot in the door for a larger secondary phase behind it. But even on its own, this 88 house plan has fatal flaws that simply cannot be fixed. First, the footpath access onto the Green Road is simply not safe. It will more than triple the number of houses on that side of the road, and the proposed single entrance will force pedestrians onto a legacy pavement that shrinks to less than 80 centimetres in places. You cannot fit a wheelchair or mobility scooter, a pram or anything of that nature on a path that narrow, and parents with children will be forced into oncoming traffic on what is a very busy main road. Residents will not sell their land to accommodate this footway, and any attempt to narrow the road itself will only increase traffic congestion back onto Cockayne Avenue and into the town if it was even possible. National safety rules say that a site must have safe access for everyone, and this site physically cannot deliver that. It will be a public safety hazard, further exacerbated by the resulting increase in vehicular traffic that it would create. Second, what sits under the ground? This land sits on an old clay pit and landfill with completely unknown contents lying under the surface. Has this even been considered? Additionally, because the land falls downhill and sewage cannot physically flow uphill, it would mean that the site will likely rely on a permanent mechanical sewage pump in order to function. These are treated as a last resort, are prone to failure and carry the risk of localised flooding and sewage backup, not to mention the additional running costs. Following the recent independent inquiry into the Matlock Gritstone road failure, this council was given a clear warning in that you cannot sweep ground instability and sewage risks under the carpet and hope to fix them later. You have to prove the site is safe before it goes into the plan. Thirdly, constant creeping development is crushing the infrastructure of the town. Piecemeal developments like this are squeezing Ashbourne dry. Small estates popping up here and there and clogging narrow streets, overwhelming overstretched schools and doctors while contributing zero sustainable solutions to improve the town's facilities. Finally, this greenfield sits outside the settlement boundary in the Ashbourne neighbourhood plan that was democratically drawn up to protect our green spaces. The boundaries that protect the Peak District in turn mean that peripheral towns like Ashbourne have to disproportionately shoulder more of the burden for the whole district. This is both unfair and undemocratic. We ask you tonight to stand up for common sense, stand up for the people of Ashbourne and vote to remove policy HC2(EE) from the local plan. And thank you for the opportunity to address Council tonight.
Thank you. If we've got Nicholas next, and then after Nicholas, it's Brett O'Connell, please. Thank you.
Chair, councillors, thank you for allowing me to speak. I respectfully urge you to reject the inclusion of the land off Green Road from the local plan, because the evidence suggests that it is one of Ashbourne's most ecologically significant natural assets. My name is Dr. Nick Pammont. I live on Green Road with my wife and our 3 young children, and I also work as a university academic specialising in wildlife protection. I speak today both as a local resident and as someone whose professional work has focused on the conservation of wildlife and natural environments. My family and I have come to appreciate that this landscape is far more than open fields. It is a thriving ecosystem supporting a diversity of wildlife and providing an increasingly rare opportunity for local families to experience nature on their doorstep. We regularly see barn owls, sparrowhawks, red kites, and multiple species of bats. These are not isolated sightings, but evidence of a landscape that continues to support protected and increasingly vulnerable species. At the heart of this landscape flows the Henmore Brook, a fragile ecosystem and important wildlife corridor that is particularly sensitive to habitat loss, pollution, and surface water runoff associated with development. Perhaps the strongest evidence concerns the Eurasian otter. Professional ecologist Steve Docker undertook one of the most comprehensive long-term monthly monitoring studies of the Henmore Brook. His surveys demonstrates that otters are regular users of this watercourse. At a monitoring location close to the proposed development site, otter spraints were recorded on 74 of 128 monthly surveys, a detection rate of 58%. Otters are recognised as a flagship indicator species. Their presence reflects clean water, healthy fish populations, well-connected wildlife habitat, and a functioning ecosystem. Steve Docker concluded that further development around the Henmore Brook without adequate provision for wildlife could place this species under threat. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust is also delivering a watervole recovery programme within the River Dove catchment, including the Henmore Brook. While the brook also supports brown trout, another recognised indicator of good water quality. Otters, bats, watervoles and birds of prey are protected under UK wildlife law, recognising that conserving these species also means protecting the habitats on which they depend. I support the need for new homes. Ashbourne will continue to grow, but not every piece of land is equal. Once an ecosystem like this is lost, it cannot simply be recreated. New houses can be built elsewhere, decades of ecological richness cannot. I therefore respectfully ask you to reject the inclusion of the Green Road site and protect one of Ashbourne's most valuable natural landscapes. Thank you.
Brett, you're next, and then I don't know if Tina Jesson is here, but if she's not, it would be Richard Stone next. Thank you, Brett. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I wish to object to the proposal to allocate the land off the Green Road in Ashbourne for future residential development within the revised local plan. My concerns focus on 2 key issues: highway safety and surface water drainage. Firstly, highway safety. A development of around 88 dwellings is likely to generate approximately 200 additional vehicle movements each day. This would place significant extra pressure on the Green Road. The site is particularly sensitive because it's close to 2 schools. Every day, large numbers of pupils, parents and residents use the footways and the zebra crossing. I have personally witnessed several near misses at the crossing, demonstrating that the existing highway network is already under pressure. Increased traffic can only make the situation worse, especially during busier periods. Vehicle speeds on the Green Road also appear to have increased in recent years. More traffic, combined with vehicles turning into and out of the new development, would inevitably increase the potential for collisions. Before this site is considered suitable for allocation, there should be clear evidence that the highway network can safely accommodate the extra vehicles a development of this size would create. My second concern is drainage. During heavy rainfall, surface water flows down the Green Road and floods driveways on the southern side. This suggests the current drainage system is already running at full capacity. A development would introduce more hard surfaces, increase the volume of runoff, Unless there's robust evidence that additional water can be managed without worsening the existing flooding, this remains a significant concern. It's important to remember the purpose of the local plan is not simply to find land for housing. It's to identify the most suitable, sustainable and deliverable sites after reasonable alternatives have been assessed. Where there are genuine concerns over highway safety, pedestrian safety around schools and existing drainage problems, the council must ask whether this truly is the best location for a development. If other sites can deliver housing with fewer infrastructure constraints and less impact on existing residents, those sites should be preferred. I'm aware there is a need for new homes, but they must be built in the right places. The National Planning Policy Framework is clear that any proposed development should only proceed where it can be accommodated safely and without increasing flood risk. In my view, those tests have not yet been met for the Green Road. I therefore respectfully ask the Council not to allocate this site within the revised local plan and instead to choose locations that can accommodate future growth safely, sustainably and with the least impact on the existing community. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Brad. Richard, over to you. And then next on our list is Sarah Whitehead. It's switched on, so.
Right. Could I address the chair first? Nick Adams has been in contact with me. He struggled to come and he asked if I could represent him. I have his views because I spoke with him before I come and I've incorporated them in what I have to say and I'm not asking for 6 minutes.
That's absolutely.
So if I may?
Please go ahead.
Right. My name's Richard Stone. I live in Hole in the Wall. That's just become apparent why I'm concerned about this later, but there is a broader concern and the concern is the overall area. First, I'd like to thank Peter for addressing our Quiet Lane meeting last month. That was very good of you to do that. We found that very useful. I'd like to make an observation though, and the observation is that by our calculation, 75% of the government required housing for the Dales is scheduled to go into the environ of Ashbourne if we include Brailsford. And that's a lot, and we get a traveller's site on top of that, so that's more people and that's more movement. As housing tends to follow airfields, to take the Green Lane people's point, that's not unsurprising, really. But we would hope that our elected representatives would provide two things. First, protection of local amenity for all, current residents and newcomers. I think that's very important. And the second is the provision of adequate infrastructure, which, as we're getting the lion's share of houses, we would expect or hope to get certainly the lion's share of infrastructure. So for the first, we would ask that the council considers the inclusion, by whatever means appropriate, of the adjacent parish councils and the Quiet Lane group as the airfield development project moves forward through its later phases. Now, I do know that, Peter, you put forward a proposal initially, didn't you, that there was going to be a framework development group. And I understand that the requirement for that has been superseded by the new plan. But we'd like it if we could be involved within that consultative process, because initially I don't think the adjacent parish councils were. For the second point, the provision of infrastructure, we can see an opportunity, as indeed I think the plan hints at, of a link road north to the A517, which would be beneficial to both local residents, myself in particular, as I live in Hole in the Wall, but also Ashbourne, as it would reduce congestion considerably. And we would ask the council to formally investigate this possibility together with highways. If you could just put some more around that. As it's currently couched, I think it's an aspiration as much as a requirement. So while funds might not immediately be available, they may be in the future. And if a good prospective route could be identified, it could then be protected through future stages of the development plan, and we won't have a problem where there are houses where roads should be, and there's access for people to get to the new houses that do need to be built. We would make the further point that Darley Moor, which is only about 3 miles from Ashbourne, has no sustainable transport at present. And we're looking there, I think, at 4,000 houses proposed, which at an average occupancy would be 9,000 people, which is approaching Ashbourne at current population, I think. And they're accessing, again, one busy route with no infrastructure. So these things really do need to be fully considered and, if possible, built into the plan in with greater clarity. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, you're next, and then Andrew Hall, please. Sarah, if you press the left-hand button, that starts the microphone.
So good evening, I'm Sarah Whitehead, Chair of Bradley Parish Council. So Bradley Parish Council is not asking to stop Ashbourne growing. We are asking you not to sign off this plan while the impact of that growth on Bradley remains unaddressed. Bradley is a 5th-tier rural settlement. It is not just a point on the map, it is a thriving community. Residents around Ladyhole Lane, Yeldersley Lane and Moor End are daily experiencing increased traffic, speeding and near misses following development at the Ashbourne airfield with the first phase. During the Ashbourne Reborn works, further traffic was directed through Bradley by SatNav. Our Grade 2 listed hole in the wall continues to be struck and put at risk by unsuitable vehicles. These are not future concerns, these are happening now. The Council's own adopted policies are clear. Policy S4 says development must not generate traffic which, when considered cumulatively, would cause severe harm to the road network or damage the character of rural roads. Policy S8 recognises that Ashbourne serves a wide rural area and commits the Council to securing suitable traffic management and mitigation. Policy HC19 requires growth to be safely managed, cumulative transport impacts to be addressed and safe provision to be made for walkers, cyclists and horse riders. Yet Bradley Parish Council can find no full traffic assessment, no reliable speed or vehicle data, no funded safety measures and no timetable for action. Bradley residents have raised these concerns repeatedly, yet they feel forgotten and unheard. Our request is clear. The revised local plan must include a specific clause recognising designated quiet lane status as a protective measure for 5th-tier villages, including Bradley, where they are affected by traffic from future development elsewhere. We believe this would help protect Bradley residents from serious injury or death and ensure that our rural roads are not left to carry the consequences of growth without proper protection. This mustn't be vague wording or something left to be considered later. It must be clearly written into the plan. This council has an opportunity to act before a preventable tragedy occurs. I request this plan is not signed off until that clear protection for 5th-tier villages is written into it. Thank you.
Thank you. So Andrew, and then I'm not sure if either Anne Green or Darren Green are here, but then it would be Councillor Peter Rosser. So Andrew, over to you. If you press the button, that's right. You have 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Andrew Hall. I own Hole in the Wall Farm in Bradley Ashbourne. I'm here today to speak about the Hole in the Wall Farm. It's a unique Grade 2 listed building. It's in Derbyshire, and we believe it's time to make the lane passing to a quieter and safer place. Hole in the Wall Farm is like any ordinary farmhouse. So public lane runs directly through the middle of the building, making it a rare part of Derbyshire's heritage. For generations, this lane has served local residents, farmers, walkers and horse riders. It was a peaceful country lane that complemented the character of the historic building. Today, however, the situation is very different. The lane has increasingly become a rat run for drivers avoiding busier roads, speeding cars and regular pass through the narrow lanes. Even high-sided vehicles, and we have barriers of 9'6" that restrict the height there, that continually try and access the archway. This was never designated for modern traffic, the lane. This creates unnecessary risks for residents, pedestrians, cyclists, and anyone enjoying the surrounding countryside. The constant traffic also affects the historic building itself. A listed structure that has survived for centuries should not have to endure this excessive vibration, noise, and potential damage. Heavy goods using this as a shortcut has become an avid concern. We're not asking for the road to be closed. We are asking for sensible measures that put safety and heritage first. Reducing the speed limit to 20 miles an hour from 60 miles an hour, restricting unsuitable heavy vehicles where appropriate, and improving the signage in and around Bradley and other areas. We would encourage a quiet lane, and we'd encourage drivers to slow down and respect both the people who live there and the historic environment. A quiet lane is more about reducing the speed. It promotes shares and use between motorists, walkers, cyclists and horse riders, encouraging everyone to use the road with preserving one of the Derbyshire's most distinctive historic buildings. Hole in the Wall Farm has stood for hundreds of years. With the right measures in place today, we can ensure that it remains a safe, attractive and protected landmark for generations to come. So I ask you guys is that please support the safeguard the historical building, support a quiet lane and reduce the speed to 20 miles an hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Peter Rosser.
Where's this magic button?
It's on. If you just sit down, you'll be able to speak.
Thank you. I am Peter Rosser, a member of Edleston and Wyreston Parish Council. Our very great concern is the proposal to develop Darley Moor as the principal means of meeting the district's housing target in the revised local plan, with the huge commitment to build 1,052 dwellings there by 2042. We want to thank Councillors David Hughes and Peter O'Brien for coming on the 11th of June to our village hall to explain the proposals to residents and parish councillors. I must say that what they told us came as a shock. We had been aware for some time that Darley Moor was one of many sites in the district considered for housing, but the scale of the proposals appalled us. Very briefly, I would make 4 main points about the situation as we see it. My colleague Matthew Taylor will take up some further significant matters. Firstly, we are unhappy about the way in which this matter has been sprung on us. We would have expected that we would have been consulted much earlier in more detail about a development on this huge scale in our parish. We have local knowledge and concerns that could have contributed to the process. We now understand that effectively this is a done deal and that any contribution we make will at best be only a matter of detail. Secondly, we question the very principle of a housing development on this scale on Darley Moor. I'm aware that local employment gets a mention in the draft plan, but the plain fact is that a very high proportion of people living here will commute to the main centres of employment, Derby and Nottingham. Is it consistent with principles of sustainability to build a commuter community at least 12 miles from the nearest city, with all the car usage that this will imply? Surely housing should be built as close as possible to centres of employment, not as remote as this. Thirdly, the last-minute and half-hearted assessment of the feasibility of the development indicates a number of drawbacks with the scheme, and at best manages an amber classification for suitability for development. It is unclear how this has then been translated into it being announced as DDDC's preferred site for a garden community, in inverted commas. It seems that a fundamentally unsuitable site has been selected due to its convenience in having a willing landowner and a quick and easy way of meeting housing targets. That should not be the basis for a local plan that includes a catastrophic development in the wrong place.
Could I ask you to draw your conclusions?
And item 4, most concerning of all, it appears to us that this council is being asked to approve a commitment with no plan to define what is going to happen, only a broad location. We are aware of a map which shows the area which has been offered to the district council by the owners of Darley Moor racetrack and most of the former airfield. However, this does not appear to be defined as the whole of the area under consideration for housing. Does that provide enough land for 1,052 dwellings, plus schools and other amenities included in the draft local plan?
Thank you.
Indeed, the draft local plan proposes that future revisions to the local plan would include additional housing up to a total of 1,500 dwellings.
Councillor Rosser, I must ask you to stop, please, because we've gone well over the 3 minutes. These matters can be submitted later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matthew Taylor. And if Joanne Blakely could also be ready to speak after that. Thank you.
It's the one on the left, isn't it?
It's on.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just pick up quickly from Peter. I'm also on the parish council for Edleston and Wyeston, and we've heard some really good representations this evening, particularly around environmental impact and sustainability. And I think it has to be mentioned that the starting points are 1,052 houses with potentially 4,000 houses. And this new settlement would catastrophically impact on the immediate area and effectively obliterate Edleston and Wyeston as a rural parish. And more importantly, as we've heard about, Ashbourne would be significantly affected, both in its character, and Ashbourne is integral to all of our enjoyments of the local area. Some of the key impacts of this development are 1,052 houses will effectively increase. That would be 25% of the current residents of Ashbourne, and that doesn't include Ashbourne Airfield and further planning consents in the pipeline. Traffic and congestion, very important to us. Quiet lanes. There will be a rat run between the 515 and the A52. That is a given. That is an unclassified road and a narrow lane, and it will impact with, it'll make it more dangerous, pollution and degradation of the local environment. What would be required for something of this size from an environmental perspective is huge. You've got to have all new power infrastructure, a new substation. You've got to provide power. UK building regs doesn't allow, is heavily restricting new gas regulations. Therefore, we've got to look at hydro or green technology, which would probably be a solar farm. And we see what's just happened with that at Brailsford. You've then further got to look at a completely new wastewater management plant, which would have to be supplied by Severn Trent, sustainable drainage systems. And that's all about, and sustainability is the key here. And I think that is highly contested. The development would ultimately function as a commuter town dependent on private vehicles. And if it was to actually get to 4,000 houses under 3 miles from Ashbourne, it could be considered a car-dependent sprawl. By naming it a garden village under the National Planning Policy Framework, there's an expectation that developers will meet the unviable infrastructure and self-containment costs. And we believe at this point that demonstrates a fundamental misrepresentation of the gravity and highly detrimental consequences of this proposal. The most probable outcome of committing to this proposal as part of the local plan is that developers will use financial viability assessments, which I'm sure you're all aware of, and that will give them a get-out clause from meeting their commitments
And if they don't meet their commitments, this 4,000 home development would effectively become a dormitory town, highly impacting Ashbourne. And Ashbourne would take the strain and suffer the consequences. The key objective, which we understood from the presentation, was that this is to create a garden village on Darley Moor and to maintain the integrity of Ashbourne as a historic market town. But as we've heard this evening, this scale of development within or under 3 miles of Ashbourne, its very existence within such close proximity to Ashbourne will, in addition to the considerable new building already currently underway and the pipeline, will irrevocably destroy the character, historic significance and rural charm of both Ashbourne and its surrounding
Councillor
parishes.
Taylor, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Over 4 minutes. Could I please ask people to keep themselves to the 3-minute limit? Otherwise, it's unfair on other speakers and the rest of the people here. Thank you. Joanne, over to you. You have 3 minutes.
I'm from Moor End and Bradley near Ashbourne. Good evening, Council. I'm speaking about the speeding traffic along Ladyhole Lane and Yeldersley Lane between the A517 and the A52. The traffic along these narrow lanes increased during the Ashbourne Reborn project as drivers sought a route to avoid the traffic jams in Ashbourne. And although that project is largely finished, the rat running through these lanes has not reduced to the pre-project levels. This traffic frequently exceeds safe driving speeds, as the drivers are looking to get between these two A-class roads as quickly as possible. There's also been an increase in traffic due to the Ashbourne airfield development, which is still only at the early stages of phase 1. There's a lot more to come. The design code for this development foresaw this problem and stated the need for mitigation measures. It is these mitigation measures that I and others are seeking. Yeldersley and Ladyhole lanes are narrow, there are no pavements, no carriageway markings, no street lighting. There are numerous intrusive high hedges, many obscured sightlines and few passing places. The lanes pass through a field of cattle bounded by 2 cattle grids, through the hamlet of Moor End and through the Grade 2 listed hole-in-the-wall building. These narrow rural country lanes are used by pedestrians, dog walkers, cyclists, horse riders, all of whom have no option but to be on the roadway itself. There are no pavements. These road users are now at danger from speeding traffic. The junction where Yeldersley Lane connects to the A517 is extremely dangerous. This has already been recognised as a result of a fatal accident which led to the installation of warning signs about turning traffic, although sadly these warning signs are often ignored. It's a frightening junction to use. You have no idea what the speed of the cars will be or the traffic as they come over the brow of the hills on the 517, and there's now a bus stop at the bottom of the dip in the road next to the junction with Yeldersley Lane, further adding to hazards. The junction of Ladyhole Lane with the A52 does not meet statutory visibility splay requirements and is also a daunting junction, as you have to protrude onto the A552 in order to see what's coming. The increased traffic volume on these lanes now adds an increased likelihood of further accidents at these junctions, something which nobody wants. For everyone's safety, we would like to request a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit and quiet lane status on these lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. So next it's Rosie Keedy, followed by Graham Keedy. No, it's on already. Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. What I have to say should come as no surprise to any of you, as my concerns have already been clearly highlighted in the local plan, which states its vision and aim is, and I quote, to ensure that new development contributes to and does not prejudice the town's highway infrastructure. It goes on to state that a weakness in Ashbourne is ongoing traffic movement within the town, and that unsustainable development in Ashbourne is a considerable threat causing further impact on the transport issues and overloading pinch points. Furthermore, it says that resolving Ashbourne's traffic problems is seen as the #1 issue by local residents. The Ashbourne Airfield Development Design Code states, and again I'm quoting, "Vehicular access to the site will not be granted via Ladyhole Lane, and it is important to consider how to deter increased rat running through these narrow country lanes. Mitigation against rat running via Ladyhole Lane and Yeldersley Lane must be demonstrated at the outline stage." I would therefore like to ask why, as far as we the residents are aware, there are no plans to achieve any of the above aspirations. I've had the privilege of living here for 6 years, and in the last 2 years, the Ashbourne Reborn project and consequential roadworks have given a taster of the effects of increased traffic in these single-track farm lanes. Walking on the lanes is no longer the pleasure it was. Indeed, when negotiating the many blind bends, it feels a dangerous pursuit. Driving is also fraught with hazards. This is because many drivers using the lanes as a rat run drive at speeds that demonstrate no regard whatsoever for the walkers, the cyclists, the horse riders, and the livestock on the lanes. The cows do a great job of slowing them down to a standstill on occasion, and this has enabled me to approach drivers to ask why they are here. Some responses are not repeatable, but others have told me that the traffic jams in town necessitate taking this route. When I've asked people to slow down, it is usually pointed out that they are indeed driving well below the ridiculous speed limit of 60. The cows wander on the lane immediately adjacent to my garden, and I have witnessed abuse of the mothers and the babies numerous times. This can take the form of barging cars into them, or simply repeatedly hooting horns or even swearing at them. I no longer feel safe taking my granddaughters out in their pushchairs unless I have additional adults to protect from the back and from the front when approaching the blind bends. I have no problem with housing. I accept the need, but it is madness to build where the roads are so inadequate. And I would like to ask you to consider that, please, in your planning. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Graham, if that's okay, followed by our last speaker, Joe Adams. Over to you.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Graham Keady. I live on Ladyhole Lane in Yeldersley, Ashbourne. Outside my window or from my garden, I can see a stretch of this lane. I would have liked to show you a picture of it, but I'll describe it instead. It's a single track lane. Some driveways open up onto it. Our section is about 50% downhill, 50% uphill. There's an S-bend in the middle, and at one end a blind corner turning almost 90 degrees with a rural type hawthorn hedge thick on the inside edge of the corner, making visibility around it impossible, virtually impossible. At the other end of the stretch is a cattle grid, and the lane traverses or borders on 3 fields which are in constant use for grazing cattle and their numerous calves. The stretch measures 0.2 of a mile, and using a stopwatch, I can work out the average speed of passing vehicles. It's not very scientific, I know, but it does give you a good insight into the speed of passing traffic in this quiet rural lane. Many drivers clock up more than 30 miles an hour, many if not most, and occasionally 40 or more is achieved. And remember, this is the average speed on this particular section of the lane. I'd like to mention the Highway Code, which puts pedestrians and cyclists and riders at the top of its hierarchy for protection from motorised traffic. A significant number of drivers here seem to have forgotten this. And there's another code I'd like to refer to. It's the Rural Design Code from Active Travel England, a government advisory body. They recommend a maximum speed of 20 miles an hour in rural lanes and suggest a target of 10 vehicles per hour, or 1 every 5 minutes. These targets have already far exceeded or ignored in our local lanes, and conditions created by rat running have been steadily worsening since the closure of the roads associated with Ashbourne Reborn. We're very happy in principle to see new houses built in the local vicinity, but only if the local road network is able to sustain the extra traffic created. We're especially intent on trying to preserve the rural nature of the lanes in our area in which we live, and to maintain a degree of safety for those most at risk of injury or worse, the pedestrians, riders and cyclists who regularly use these lanes. I see no reason to believe that the notorious road network in Ashbourne is adequate even for the present volume of traffic. And in addition of perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 road users on the airfield, and maybe 7,000 or 8,000, who knows, at Darley Moor, not to mention the possible addition of a drive-through McDonald's, the proposal should not be entertained until we see a meaningful improvement in the road network available to accommodate the likely traffic increase. Thank you, Chair.
Hello, Joe. You've
Council.
got 3 minutes.
I'll be very brief because I just submitted a question, which I will read to you, which is, I'm challenging the integrity of the due diligence regarding the impact on the local communities and alternative access to the A517, which would alleviate the lane cut-throughs from additional traffic. Listening to everybody here today, it seems very real to me that common sense hasn't been very common. And it's clear with the development up on the airfield that, yes, we do need houses, but when I looked at the actual detail of the plan, I saw that the width of the road, being, I think it's about 5.5 metres, is not actually going to be sustainable for the amount of houses up there that are planned to be without any off-road parking. Garages will potentially only have one car in, and as we all know, most houses these days have 2 vehicles. And that is because of the nature of where we are. We're a rural community with very poor public transport. And the A52 corridor of building, which has already started, has actually resulted in, for a start from Brailsford, it does go beyond that and back towards Derby, with an increase in housing where we're already experiencing the rat running through the lane system. I've lived on the lane for 40 years and I have never seen so much traffic now that's cutting through from just the Brailsford end. And also we started to see, as one of the speakers has already indicated, the Ashbourne Reborn project actually generated a lot of new people who had moved into the area, discovering ways to cut through to the A517. There was a request for a link road from the A52 to the A517 that I am aware started back in 1976 but never actually ever amounted to anything. And I think that the council should very much push that this option is included in any future planning for that airfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got a representative? We're not sure if we have a representative from the Airfield Companies Group. They were scheduled to speak, but we don't believe they're present. In which case that does bring that part of the meeting to a conclusion. And thank you for all of those comments. As I say, the time to submit those is also in August via the relevant channel, which will become clear. There's another part of the public participation which now takes place, which is for us to go through a series of questions which have been received from the public. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to read them out and my colleague here Councillor Lucy Peacock is going to read the response that we've had from the council officers. So these are questions to the council, and the council officers have responded. So the first question is from Sarah Benson. It's relating to the Schlar 962 site at Jack Hill Farm, Tansley. And it says, issues of water supply and drainage. This use of a greenfield site on an area with many underlying springs that feed into Bentley Brook is not sustainable with current damaged and broken sewer work already an issue. Has a full hydrology response been done before submitting this land into the local plan?
And the response is this site has been considered as part of a level 2 strategic flood risk assessment. That risk assessment has informed the requirements in policy DS13 that allocates the site for development, which requires that any developer undertakes a site-specific flood risk assessment before any planning application can be considered, as well as demonstrating sewerage capacity.
The next question, also from Sarah, is according to the latest figures, there are over 10,000 empty homes in Derbyshire. Some are second homes, but a large majority are either empty through probate or are stuck with no relatives to action a sale. Councils have an ability to compel the sale and bringing back of these houses into the local market. There is no mention of this work in the local plan. Question.
The plan deals with allocating land for development. As these homes are already built, it would not need to allocate them. The council and its partners have a number of work streams to address empty homes in Derbyshire Dales.
A question from Kirsty Gascoigne. Can the council confirm what evidence it has that a legal, safe and deliverable vehicular access exists via Olympian Way, that's in Darley-Dale, for the proposed Schlar 955 allocation, and whether all necessary rights over the private road have been secured?
The local highways authority have not raised objection to the principle of access being secured via Olympian Way. The policy HC2 brackets 11 requires a transport assessment to be undertaken before any planning application can be considered. A future planning application will set out the proposed layout and access.
A question from Terry Eckersley, who's the Chief Executive of the River Network. His first question, how will this work out with the imminent local government reorganisation fast approaching, and how will you relationally navigate better with County Council and others, especially in light of heavy-handed feedback from them and others also in the press about you and the provision is being made for homeless provision and improvements in the assessment of these?
The response is that the government have made it clear that councils should continue to prepare local plans, notwithstanding local government reorganisation proposals. It's expected that this plan will be adopted by this council prior to the new council coming into being.
Okay. His second question, and I'm not quite sure what the initials CDP stand for. How will you work better with the voluntary sector, other partners, stakeholders, and be more relational and inclusive? And do you have a lifelong learning and CDP to get relevant housing qualifications for staff? And do you have plans to embrace radical positive cultural change needed within the district council?
I'm guessing that should be CPD, continuing professional development. Anyway, the response is Derbyshire Dales District Council is committed to working positively and proactively with the voluntary, community and charitable organisations, recognising the vital role they play in supporting residents, strengthening communities and improving wellbeing across the district. The council provides financial support through a range of grant programmes, helping local organisations to deliver services, develop community facilities, increase volunteering opportunities and respond to local needs. Through its long-standing partnership with the Derbyshire Dales Council for Voluntary Service, the council helps to build the capacity, resilience and sustainability of the voluntary sector, ensuring community groups and charities have access to advice, support, networking opportunities and funding guidance. At Derbyshire Dales District Council, we recognise that investing in our people is key to delivering excellent services. Through our annual personal development review process, we work with employees to identify and support individual development and training needs. ensuring staff have access to the skills, qualifications and learning opportunities required to meet the evolving demands of the housing sector. We're also committed to fostering a positive and ambitious culture where employees feel valued, accountable and empowered. By encouraging collaboration, innovation and a strong focus on residents, we can continue to improve services and deliver better outcomes for our communities.
Questions from Aaron Arnell. First question, regarding the local plan and the proposed site adjacent to Olympian Way, Darley-Dale, can the council please clarify how provisions for pedestrians and cyclists will be implemented? And she follows that with a statement saying, I fear for my own safety using the footpath along the A6 as it's very narrow. I have to use this route to use my local shop and the bus stop regularly. The junction at the top of Olympian Way is not pedestrian friendly. There is traffic coming from 3 directions. To see if vehicles are approaching from the right leaving Olympian Way, I have to step onto the road while also watching the blind corner for traffic turning onto Church Street from the A6. Should another pedestrian be on the footpath turning into Church Road from the A6, one of us has to step into the road to let the other pass. As Church Road is mainly on-street parking, visibility is not always clear. Extra vehicles using these roads will increase my concerns for mine and others' safety.
The response to that is that the policy HC211 requires a transport assessment to be undertaken before any planning application can be considered. The future planning application will set out the proposed layout.
And Anne's second question is, the local plan encourages the use of public transport. Have the council any influence on local bus services? There is no direct route to Chesterfield for the hospital, shopping and leisure. No direct route to Sheffield. The buses only run every half hour. Due to the length of the route and the weather and roadworks are often late.
And the response to that is that other authorities are responsible for the bus network.
Anne's question 3. The local plans focus on providing local housing, yet it contradicts itself by stating Darley-Dale has good access for Derby and Sheffield. Both take over an hour to get to by bus, less by train. Can the council explain why local residents would need to travel so far for employment?
The district provides good local employment opportunities and many residents work locally. But there are also others that work further away, and the plan recognises the range of transport options to these other centres of employment.
Questions from Louisa Bone. First question. If the local plan is to make Darley-Dale more sustainable, has consideration been given to employment opportunities within this area to prevent this becoming a commuter town?
The response to that is that as the work on settlement hierarchy demonstrates, there are already a number of employment opportunities in Darley-Dale. Policy EC1 supports new development that creates employment opportunities.
Louisa's second question, has the impact of development on further flood risk been considered given the regular flooding at 4 Lane Ends and Darley Bridge?
The response is a level 2 strategic flood risk assessment has been undertaken for the area. Where appropriate, some proposed developments considered in the SHLA have not been taken forward due to flooding considerations, and the strategic flood risk assessment has guided the allocation policies to mitigate any local impacts.
And Louisa's third question, has the impact of development been considered with regard to the loss of open green space on the A6 corridor?
The response to that is simply yes, and policy PD10 has been strengthened accordingly.
We have questions from Osmaston and Yeldersley Parish Council. The first one, what cumulative traffic modelling has been undertaken for Osmaston, Yeldersley and neighbouring villages?
Response, a traffic model has not been developed. However, a transport evidence-based review and strategy has been undertaken that supports a vision-led and outcomes-focused approach to transport planning, enabling the strategy to balance the movement of people and goods with place-based objectives and to promote sustainable, safe and accessible transport choices. It also underpins the identification of deliverable and proportionate interventions, ensuring that the local plan is supported by appropriate infrastructure planning, and that its impacts can be effectively monitored and managed over the plan period. This is in accordance with national guidance.
Second question from the council. How has the District Council assessed the impact of local plan allocations on rural roads beyond the immediate development sites?
The response A transport evidence-based review and strategy has been undertaken that supports a vision-led and outcomes-focused approach to transport planning, enabling the strategy to balance the movement of people and goods with place-based objectives, as I said earlier, and to promote sustainable, safe and accessible transport choices. It also underpins the identification of deliverable and proportionate interventions, ensuring that the local plan is supported by appropriate infrastructure planning and that its impacts can be effectively monitored and managed over the plan period. This is in accordance with national guidance. So is that the same answer as previous? Yeah.
And the final question from the council: what mitigation measures are proposed to protect rural communities from increased traffic, including speeding, congestion and road safety concerns?
Some allocation policies specifically require future planning applications to ensure the provision of supporting transport infrastructure, including managing the impact of traffic on the strategic and local road network.
Okay. And then our final question is from Jo Adams, who has spoken already tonight. She says, I wish to ask the question about the integrity of due diligence regards impact on the local community and alternative access to the A517 to alleviate lane cut through by additional traffic. And there is a response.
So the response is that it is assumed that this question relates to allocation DS11 land to the south of the A52 in Ashbourne. I think it does. This policy requires future planning applications to prepare a transport assessment and travel plan before they can be considered.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Okay. Councillors have also had a series of submissions by email, which they have in front of them. I'm afraid the members of the public don't have those, but because the councillors have only had those relatively recently, I propose that we now have a 5-minute adjournment for councillors just to flick through those. In order for that to happen, I need a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Buttle, Councillor Nash, and could I see all those in favour of that 5-minute adjournment? Thank you. Members of the public, that gives you a chance for 5 minutes to stretch your legs and to grab some more water and have a comfort break. Thank you.
Well, I've had a small chance to read through these. Obviously, it isn't
Yes.
very long to get through them all. One particular one's asked that the letters read out at the meeting. I wonder if you could read that out, please.
Could you direct me to
Statement from Stuart Frith.
To be honest, no, I'm not inclined to do that because we do have to balance the meeting with the opportunity for yourselves as councillors now to have your say. I appreciate that people haven't necessarily had a chance, other members of the public haven't had a chance to hear this, but the councillors have had this in front of them, and that's the point of these statements.
Thank you. I think Mr. Frith particularly would have liked his statement. That's why he sent it and said he would like it to be read out at the meeting.
Yeah. It's just a question of practicality, balancing the time that we have before us tonight, but thank you for raising that. The next point on the agenda is interests. So could I ask all councillors who have what they consider to be a disclosable pecuniary interest to raise that now? There are none. Thank you. In which case we move on to questions from members. So the first of those is from Councillor Lees. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Given that the housing sites included the number of dwellings and stated in the proposed local plan, along with traveller sites and their location, could this be classed as predetermination by members who support the local plan when it comes to a planning meeting?
Okay. Now, we have Councillor Ripton, who is standing in for the leader tonight, and he will respond.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. No. As the report sets out, Council is responsible for the preparation and adoption of a new local plan. Predetermination relates to planning applications, not to local plan allocations. The draft local plan allocates various sites for development. However, this does not mean that an application for planning permission at any site will automatically be granted. Decision-making on planning applications is informed by the local plan, but each application for planning permission is individually considered on its own merits. Members of the planning committee may have views on particular sites. However, this does not mean that their decisions on any subsequent planning applications are predetermined, provided they approach each application with an open mind and a willingness to listen to the arguments and have regard to all material considerations.
Would you like to come back on that?
No, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Given that the Council's own delays meant that critical data was only published late on Wednesday afternoon, the 15th of July 2026, how can you guarantee that councillors, let alone Derbyshire Dales residents, have enough time to thoroughly review these highly complex documents before being asked to vote on them?
Councillor Ripton.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hobson. Progress on the local plan has regularly been reported to the local plan committee, and so there are no surprises in the plan that is being reported to council. The statutory periods have been followed. Officers have made themselves available to all members to help them with any queries on the content of the plan and the report.
Thank you. I have a supplementary. Two of the comments from our speakers this evening, forgotten and unheard, and we have local knowledge that could have contributed. If these complex documents, the first of which 956 pages, contain serious errors or admissions that councillors and the public only spot after the vote tonight because of the rush timetable, I mean, the 17th of July meeting was also cancelled, and we've got a wodge of papers as well tonight. Who will be held accountable, officers or councillors who were denied proper time to look at these documents?
I'm not sure if that's a rhetorical question or
No,
not, Councillor Ripton.
it is what will happen if serious errors are public. Bearing in mind we're having the meeting tomorrow night to agree. There's no time, is there?
Well, I'm told that members of the local planning team are actually going to correct any factual errors which are in the report in the course of the next 2 weeks before it actually goes out for public consultation. You have a second question.
Thank you. The Local Government Association explicitly advises against running consultations during the summer holidays. Why is this council ignoring that guidance again and rushing another consultation through when people are on holiday and many parish and town councils do not have meetings?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hobson. The consultation exercise referred to in the report is a statutory consultation which is bound by legal requirements and which the Council is required to undertake in accordance with the relevant regulations and in line with the decision of the full Council in January 2026. Government guidance on the local plan process advises that the consultation should run for a minimum of 6 weeks. The timetable set by Government for submission of the draft plan has been set by Government. As members are aware, residents and town and parish councils and other stakeholders have had many months advance notice of the timetable and the key dates. In the case of a non-statutory consultation, while guidance from the LGA as to the length of the consultation is that the pre-election period should be avoided, and that in considering whether to go ahead with a non-statutory consultation exercise, local authorities should consider the time of year, the LGA do not advise against consultation during the holiday period. In any event, LGA guidance is concerned with non-statutory consultations where a local authority wishes to run a consultation exercise in order to inform a proposed decision and does not apply in the present case as the Council is bound by a set timetable.
Thank you. My supplementary, Chair. Bearing in mind that this council has been ignoring residents and parish and town councils for the last 2 years over this local plan process, Mrs. Rains, for example, has probably been at every local plan meeting over these last 2 years. And now with parish and town councillors not meeting during the holidays and people being on holiday, do you really think that this consultation is remotely meaningful or representative?
I don't know if you want to respond to that. I mean, I can. I would say that parish councils and town councils have been involved in the consultation process up to now. There's been 2 previous rounds of consultation already. This is a matter of opinion, Councillor. Some of the things you are suggesting are matters of opinion.
I think parish and town councils not meeting during the summer holidays is not a matter of opinion,
Well,
it's a matter of fact.
Councillor, you've had the response on that. That's from the Local Government Association as well. Thank you.
Not fair play.
You may not be satisfied, but that's the response. Okay. I would like to reiterate to everyone that that's the end of the public section tonight. You're very welcome, and we encourage you to stay for the rest of the debate, which you will now hear. Just because the comments you've made have come to us in statements and questions where you've had an official response, that is not the end of the matter. I reiterate that everything that's been said has been considered up to now, throughout the process, throughout the years that this process has been going on. But the important thing now is for you to go away and to talk to your communities and come back and ensure that the inspector receives these comments as well as the council. So please, having done that piece of work, don't waste it. Make sure that it goes in with the consultation when that starts on the 3rd of August. Your voice at that point in time will be as important as ours. I can see some hands up there. I wouldn't normally take questions. If it's a very, very short one, I can see you're burning to say something.
Yes. Both about what exactly will the consultation look like on the 3rd of August? How do we talk to our communities? What form will the consultation take? How do we get our opinions or views to you? Because at the moment, I don't know that. I don't know if everybody else knows that, but I would like to know that.
Thank you. It's a very, very good question. I'm going to ensure that the officers who give their report in a second have a chance to respond to that specifically. And there is actually a council officer here whose role is specifically to inform and communicate with the public about that. So she may get a chance also. I'm now going to move on to item 5 on our agenda then, which is the report on the pre-submission draft, which you've actually got in front of you here. And I'd like to hand over to Esther Lindley, who is our Principal Planning Policy Officer.
before Esther comes in, Chair, if I might just give a brief administrative point, I will shortly welcome Esther and Matt and the rest of the team to go through a little bit more detail, including on the consultation. But just prior to that, one small change to the recommendations in the report. There are 7 tabled in front of you, but I'm wishing to withdraw recommendation number 7, which is the final recommendation in the report. That's one that concerns the Housing Working Group, and the reason for that is the chair of the cross-party Housing Working Group has agreed to take forward work on local lettings policies separately and bring it forward to committee when ready. So I'm comfortable that it's actually this recommendation isn't required at the moment, and instead the locals letting policy will come forward in due course. So from an administrative point of view, I'm withdrawing my recommendation 7. Recommendations 1 to 6 do stand, and I'll hand over, if I may, to Esther to talk you through them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Steve. The report before you this evening provides a revised Derbyshire Dales Local Plan for the period 2026 to 2042. As we've heard earlier, the purpose of this evening's meeting is to approve this local plan, along with the supporting sustainability appraisal, habitat regulations assessment and evidence base for a 6-week consultation period under Regulation 19 of the plan preparation process. The local plan outlines the spatial strategy, housing and employment allocations, strategic and development management policies for the future determination of planning applications in the district. As members will be aware, Council in 2020 agreed to review the existing local plan adopted in 2017 and start the preparation of a replacement. As you've heard this evening, 2 rounds of public consultation have already been undertaken on housing numbers and how the strategy may accommodate our future housing need. Those consultation exercises were undertaken in 2022 and May 2024. We have also, as a team, sought to collate a substantial amount of updated evidence base on a range of topics. As you've heard, there's been consistent member involvement on plan preparation, including from this time last year, numerous local plan committee meetings almost monthly on the spatial strategy, allocations and detailed policy wording. In order to comply with the new planning system deadlines and the Council's adopted local development scheme, the deadline for the revised local plan to be submitted to the Secretary of State for examination is December this year. The revised local plan has now been prepared and is set out for you in Appendix 1 to the report this evening. Proposed changes to support those revisions to the policy maps are also provided in Appendix 2. The main body of the report seeks to identify the key policy revisions from the current adopted local plan from 2017. The spatial strategy and vision seeks to ensure that development in the district is managed in a sustainable way that allows growth within our environmental limits, with growth identified in the market towns and Tier 2 and 3 settlements, and through the identification of a new garden community at Darley Moor. The plan also seeks to provide new and improved infrastructure and respond to the pressing challenges of tackling climate change. Turning to some of the detail, the plan seeks to fully achieve the identified local need for housing of 6,225 new homes between now and 2042. The plan sets this out through the allocation of land just shy of 7,000 homes to ensure the requirement is met and also allowing a degree of contingency should some of those sites not be implemented. In recognition of the significant uplift in our housing requirement, the plan proposes a stepped housing trajectory in recognition of the necessary adjustments in the market to deliver such a significant housing requirement. Details of the individual sites allocated are provided in paragraph 1.29. And as we've heard this evening, we also propose or identify a broad location for a new garden community at Darley Moor Airfield, with the requirement for around 1,500 homes, along with supporting services and facilities. The plan allocates 24 hectares of employment land and outlines extensive revisions to how we tackle infrastructure delivery, developer contributions, and the supporting infrastructure that's needed to facilitate that significant level of development. The plan places an increased emphasis on design and placemaking and includes a new Derbyshire Dales Design Code and incorporates the already adopted Ashbourne Airfield Design Code document. Revisions to policies relating to how we secure biodiversity net gain, tackle climate change, deliver affordable housing and rural exception sites, and meet the needs of the gypsy and traveller community are also identified in the revised local plan. So crucially, the next stage for us, as is identified on the slide before you this evening, is to undertake a statutory period of 6 weeks consultation. The arrangements for this, members, are set out in paragraph 1.33, and Matt will elaborate a little bit more on that for you in a moment. The purpose primarily of the consultation is to seek the views on the extent to which people feel the plan is legally compliant and sound. In effect, this means comments on whether the plan is justified by the evidence, effective, consistent with national policy, and positively prepared. As reiterated also in tonight's report at paragraph 1.38, in order for comments to be considered by the future inspector at the examination of the local plan, they must be submitted during the forthcoming consultation. Earlier comments made at previous stages or indeed heard this evening will not be carried forward. Following consultation, all representations will be collated and analysed prior to submission to the Secretary of State in December, along with all those comments that we receive. May I finally conclude that I wish to remind you that there is a statutory requirement for the Council to have an up-to-date development plan. To meet the tight timescales to submit the plan to the Secretary of State, there is no option to delay the decision this evening. The Council is currently without a 5-year housing land supply, and we are open to speculative, uncoordinated planning applications being submitted. I would like to reiterate the adoption of a new local plan, which seeks to set out a 5-year housing land supply, and the strategy for the delivery of our housing need is paramount. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Matt, are you going to contribute now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Esther. So when the consultation starts, all of those people who have registered on our database will be notified about the start of the consultation and where they can find the appropriate documents. There will also be press releases, social media and notices made. The plan and the supporting evidence will be made available online and in paper copy at the offices of the Council and at various libraries across the district. There will be a standard form that will be accessed via our website, and instructions will also be available on how to complete the form and make your representation. We'll be holding four events, 2 of them in person and 2 online, for people to speak to officers about the plan and find out more information or have any queries answered. We will also have a frequently asked questions on our website, and officers are also available during office hours with any queries through phone calls or emails to assist with making responses. All of the, as Esther has said, all of the responses received will be read, collated, responded to and reported back to full council later this year prior to submission of the local plan. And all of the responses made during the consultation period will also be sent to the Secretary of State and the Planning Inspector as part of that submission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We're now over to questions from councillors. Can I see hands for questions, please? Councillor Susan Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I have got 4 questions. The first question is, could someone please explain exactly what we're being asked to agree to tonight, because I think there is some confusion. Am I correct that, in my understanding, that we are voting to put this proposed local plan out to consultation? Is that it? That's the first question.
Want to do the turn, Chair? Do you want me to go? That's correct. You're being asked tonight to approve the plan for further public consultation.
Thank you. Second question then. If we as councillors would desperately want to remove some of these sites, am I correct in thinking that cannot happen at tonight's meeting?
To meet the timetable, the plan that is before you needs to go out to consultation in the next couple of weeks. We haven't got time to amend the plan or any piece of the evidence significantly to enable us to consult, review the responses and take that back to council.
And the next question, if we were to vote against this recommendation tonight for the plan to go to consultation, what would be the consequences? I think that's a really important question for someone to answer.
As Matt has alluded to, it would be very difficult for us to meet the timescales to submit to the Secretary of State by the end of the year. We would then, because of the changes to the plan making system, be required to prepare a plan under the new plan making arrangements. That would mean, at a minimum, not seeing a plan adopted or prepared for another 5 years, given the processes that are required under the new plan making system. So the council would be left for a much longer period open to challenge from speculative development, as we've outlined.
And final question, if I may, Chair. So, if the public put forward their concerns, which we've heard tonight, there are serious concerns about some of the sites in this plan. Can we be assured that the inspector will listen to them, will read them, and could, in theory, decide to take one or more of those sites out?
Yes, so I think public tonight, and we reiterate that, please make your comments through this Regulation 19 consultation. All of those comments that are duly made through that consultation will be sent to the Planning Inspectorate. And from experience, the Planning Inspectorate do read all those comments, they do read them. And as members of the public, you are able to participate in that examination, those public sessions when they take place, if you so wish to. So there is more opportunity to stay involved in the plan making process.
Okay, Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just thank all the residents from around the district that have come to speak again tonight. I feel very sorry for the residents, to be honest, because umpteen times at various meetings these residents have come out to speak and nobody's taken any notice of them whatsoever for continuous meetings. Nobody's taken into account all these issues that they've all spoke truthfully about tonight. I can only refer to the Ashbourne airfield one and the residents from Bradley and Osmiston, Yeldersley. They are having impacts on this traffic now from the development that's already started to happen. So to me, we're lacking infrastructure should come first, not halfway through a development that could fail.
Okay. Could you form this into a question, please?
My question is then, why is nobody listening to our residents that keep coming up to these meetings?
Right. Well, you've heard that the council does listen. It's not always possible to tell how it listens, but nevertheless, being a large organisation where, you and some of your colleagues have been on the local plan committee now for months, if not years, you know that these things are taken into the mix. The mix is obviously huge. It takes into account pressures from the government and from outside as well. I think it's important to recognise that a huge amount of work has been done. I know as a ward councillor, I've suggested things and I can actually see those in the local plan, and I know that members of the public have also done the same. Where you put forward something and you don't see it incorporated in this draft, then you may feel that you haven't been listened to. I suppose I would come back and say that just because you don't see it reflected in the draft in front of you here, it doesn't mean to say you haven't been listened to. Now, the officers may have a comment on this as well, but that's my personal observation as a member of the local plan committee.
If I may come back then, Chair, if they've been listened to, why has nothing been altered in this draft plan before?
It's a draft plan. It's been
Yeah, but
altered.
why haven't they been listened to?
Okay, well, I think again that you may be coming at this from a matter of opinion, and it's very easy to hold that matter of opinion if there's something which you would like to see either in or out of the local plan. But I can guarantee you, because I've seen the changes through the various stages, that some things have altered as a result of that.
Can I also just say that one of the face-to-face meetings, which is in Ashbourne, is nearly at the end of the consultation period. So I don't feel that that is long enough for people to respond to the consultation from that face-to-face meeting. Could not, being as 75% of the development in the Dales is happening in around Ashbourne, Ashbourne people should, and surrounding villages should have the privilege of having a meeting earlier rather than later.
Okay, I'm not sure about the timing of that. Matt, would you like to comment?
Yes, I would like to comment. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the concern. I think what I'd reiterate is that there are three other sessions happening before that. If people can't attend that session, it's not a public meeting. It's an opportunity to speak to officers about the plan, and we'll give advice about how to make your representations and advise where you can find information and answer queries. So it's not a public meeting as such, and those you don't have to wait till that day. You could. Members of the public could attend any of the other sessions, or indeed phone up or email in if they have questions, and we'll try to help them as best we can. So appreciate that it is towards the end of that period, but I'd urge people, if they can't wait till then, or they're not available, then to get in touch with us before then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Archer.
Thanks, Chair. I promise there is a question. There's a bit of a preamble to it, but I promise it is a question. So from listening to various excellent contributions from members of the public and councillors tonight, it's very clear that they do understand, I think most of them anyway, the challenging position that we find ourselves in as a result of the scale of housing targets imposed on us by central government. It's also clear there seem to be three particular areas of concern coming through from the comments. One, the very clear concerns about overdevelopment in and around Ashbourne and the impact on road network and other facilities. Two, specific developments in Tansley, Green Road, Ashbourne and around Dolly Dale. And three, the scale of the proposed new settlement or garden village and the impact of that on villages around Ashbourne. So my question is, realistically, we know those things are going to come through as significant causes of concern in this consultation. So realistically, what changes could be made to the local plan to address these concerns once this consultation is complete? Because I think it's pretty clear we know what the response is going to be. And my worry is that we're limited in what we can do because of the national government housing targets. So is one potential thing that could happen of this consultation that the central government may change that target? So there's two questions there. What can we potentially do after the consultation if the strength of feeling and the evidence is very strong that these developments aren't appropriate? And secondly, is there any possibility of the government changing their target? Because that ultimately is what's put us in this extremely challenging position.
Over to the team.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So at the end of the consultation period, as we've highlighted, all those responses will be reported back to full council at the end of the year, prior to the plan being submitted, and the inspector will consider those responses. And I can't prejudge what the inspector might say about any particular site or any particular policy. It is extremely likely that the inspector will require changes to the plan, because they always do. There has never been an example where a plan hasn't been amended by an inspector to make the plan better, to make it more robust. So there is definitely opportunity for those policies and allocations to be amended. Is changing the housing target an option? Well, it is an option open to the inspector. We've presented evidence that demonstrates what that need is for Derbyshire Dales. What we believe it is, which is it is hard to calculate because the national figures, the figures using the methodology give us a district-wide figure rather than the area, which includes the area in the peak part. So we've had to disaggregate that. So that's the first thing, and they may say, well, that's not quite right, and they may determine that the housing requirement should be lower. But that's, I would say, is very unlikely given the recent examinations up and down the country and the clear push from governments over the past 10 to 15 years to increase housing numbers across the country. But we will see.
Could I just add as well, it is highly likely, as Matt said, that there will be modifications to the plan recommended by the inspector. There will be a period of consultation again on those modifications. So there'll be an opportunity again for people to make representations at that point once it's been through examination.
Nothing to come back in terms of questions, but I'll speak more at debate. Thanks.
That's all. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. Matt, I guess. Several speakers mentioned 20 miles an hour and quiet lane designation. In the consultation with the Highways Authority, who I believe were one of the consultees, did they suggest this in their response? And I've got a supplementary, I might as well say it now. And is it, if they didn't, is it something that we can suggest?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor. I'm not aware they did suggest it, and it is certainly something that can be suggested to them. It is, they are the Highway Authority. We are not, so we're unable to stipulate a, we can't say it's got to be 20 miles an hour road. What we have done in the policy, particularly around the sites around Ashbourne, is set out the need for a comprehensive transport assessment with any planning application, which would look at those off-site impacts, as well as the normal sort of accessibility type pieces of work as well. So it could be something that came out of that during a planning application stage.
And Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Roger. I've not actually been a member of the local plan committee, so I'm not au fait with a lot of this. It feels quite sound to me, what we've got here. There's something to go out to consultation. But I'm a bit curious about two things. I've got two questions, really. The first is, are these recommendations entirely based around what Derbyshire Dales wants, or have we taken into account any requests by contiguous authorities wanting us to do something under our duty to cooperate? And the second question is a bit more general. It's if the context, regulatory context changes that we're relying upon when we put this forward and publish it once it gets passed, do we have any, does it just lose all its strength, or does it have any persistence? I'm thinking, like, for example, the 20 mile an hour. If the government said we do 20 mile an hour, we would do it. But if they said don't do 20 mile an hour and we'd like it, would we have any weight? That's just an example. I could probably come up with some more.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the first question, we're not making provision for any neighbouring authorities' needs. We've not been asked to, so we're not doing that. In terms of that regulatory context, it's probably a bit of a hypothetical question, and I think the example you gave around 20 mile per hour zones, for example, would simply just trump any policy, because it'd be a new legislation, new legal requirement. So I can't think of any specific change that might have an impact on the plan itself.
Thank you. I won't continue with any of my suggestions because I think you've answered that. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. Can you confirm exactly when the current local plan we have finishes, please, for the benefit of our residents?
The plan period for the current local plan ran till 2033. However,
2033.
the housing policies in the current local plan are considered out of date because we do not have a 5-year housing land supply. There are obviously also elements of the policies in the adopted local plan that are out of date and not in conformity with national planning policy guidance and the framework. So I hope that answers.
Thank you. I'm sure people will be interested in that. A question for Councillor Shelley. You said to my colleague that we perhaps couldn't see changes that had happened over this period. I'm sure the residents of Tansley and Ashbourne and others that are here tonight would like to know if you could illustrate some of those changes for them that have been changed for their benefit, please.
Okay. Well, you put me on the spot, but I can give you one example, certainly that reflects the situation in Derbyshire Dale, where I'm a councillor, and that is the modification to policy PD10. That's the one which ensures that there is a gap between Matlock and the built settlement in Derbyshire Dale. The proposal going into the draft plan is for an extension of some of the field coverage there, which means that those fields would be protected by that policy. Now, when I say protected, it doesn't necessarily mean, as we've seen, that things can't be challenged. There was already, without going into too much detail, there was already a case where a field in PD10 many years ago, long before I was a councillor, was overruled, and that was actually built on. So what I would say is that just because there is a policy which either says something or doesn't say something, it doesn't mean to say that that thing will happen. And we live in the real world. Developers will always come forward. They will come forward regardless of whether there is an up-to-date policy and plan, and they will put things forward, and they will, you could say, they will try their luck. So what we're trying to do here is to hold the ring. We're trying to ensure that there is a balanced, positive set of policies, and I'm sure other people will say this in a minute as well. It won't satisfy everybody, but given the immense pressures that the district is under at the moment, I'm convinced that there are some positives, and that is one that I will give you tonight.
But you haven't got any others to give me for Tansley and Ashbourne and these
okay, we
places.
could go on and have this discussion
we could,
later.
but I think I've made my point. And my final question is, why are Watery Lane and Holmesford in the plan when the county council have specifically said recently that they will not release this land, and Holmesford is in the local plan, and yet this council makes no effort whatsoever to have any dialogue with the owners, the only place that's got full planning permission. So there seems to be a bit of an anomaly there.
So that's discussion on Traveller's site. I don't know if the officers would like to comment on that at all.
I'm happy to respond, Chair. In terms of Watery Lane, the council has made a clear decision that it wishes to pursue the acquisition potentially by compulsory purchase on Watery Lane. So whilst correspondence has taken place with the county council and they've made their position clear, officers are following through on the decision of this council to seek to pursue that particular site. In regard to the Holmesford site, the reason that's included in the plan is because it does have an extant planning permission. It doesn't require this council to provide that site. That site can be provided quite easily by the existing owners without any intervention or role of this council. So as an extant permission, it makes sense to include that because it would count towards the council's requirement to meet the Gypsy and Traveller assessment quota. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other questions from members? Oh, Councillor Lindsay first.
Thank you, Chair. Just 3 questions, if I could take them one by one, please. And hopefully this will clarify some of the really excellent questions that members of the public have asked. There was the issue of errors. So as I understand it, and perhaps Matt would be able to clarify this for us, that if there are any identified errors in the next couple of weeks before the consultation starts, that any minor errors will be corrected before that document goes out. And secondly, if during the consultation period, members of the public find some, errors themselves, which is, very likely, I guess, it's a very long document. There are bound to be things that are not quite right, that once identified, those errors will be collated and will be passed on to the planning inspector in full.
Thank you, councillors. We've made every effort to make sure there aren't any errors, but inevitably there might be some in there. So Yes, and I'd say if there's any spotted by members in the next few days, we can. There's the recommendation tonight enables Steve Capes to have delegated powers to make those minor changes. Because of the leading times to get this printed and to the consultation, it is really the next couple of days. And then during the consultation itself, if people make those representations during that Reg 19 period, then these will be collated. And one of the things we will send to the Secretary of State with the plan is a list of what we call other modifications. So these are typically formatting, typographical changes, typos, spellings. You know, if you've got a document title wrong or the date of it, we can list all those and we can make those changes, or we can suggest those changes to the inspectorate. And typically, they usually agree those what they're called other changes.
Did you have another question?
Thank you. Yes, it was just to confirm really that there are several members of the local plan committee here tonight, and Councillor Hobson's question about anything that's been changed in light of communications with members of the public and parish councillors. Would it be okay for them to be able to identify those changes?
Sorry, for who to be able to identify?
Well, for example,
Oh,
Councillor
yes,
Hughes.
yes.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking that from my ward, Councillors Rains and Strange from Tansley Parish Council have been incredibly diligent and have come to most, if not all, of the local plan committee meetings, and have their contributions have been really helpful. As far as I'm aware, things have changed based on their contributions. So that may be something that Councillors Hughes or O'Brien may be able to clarify. And the last question was really just to clarify that ultimately, it's not our decision whether this local plan goes ahead, that ultimately it's in the hands of the planning inspector. Would that be correct?
I'm sure that is correct, but Matt, can you?
Yes, it is ultimately for the inspector to recommend a plan which would then be presented to a future meeting of council, which we would then need to adopt. So once it's gone through examination, the examiner will decide whether or set out how the plan needs to be modified to be the appropriate strategy for the district. It would then need to come to a formal meeting of council, and the council would need to formally adopt that as the development plan for the district.
Okay. Councillor Boynton, I think you were first, and then come to Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, we need a local plan, and we've heard earlier about time constraints for dealing with this draft local plan. I suspect to know the answer to this question, but for absolute clarity of everybody, if this committee rejects putting this plan out to local consultation, is that it, or can this draft plan be put forward without consultation?
No, it can't. Part of the regulations require the consultation under Regulation 19, and we can't submit the plan without having done that consultation period.
So without putting this forward, we'd run out of time for a current plan.
That is correct, Councillor, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer Councillor Hobson's point about Tansley, DS13 provides policies for land at Jack Hill Farm. And in response to a local resident, perhaps rather than the parish council, we introduced or changed two policies in that associated with transport. The first was changed to promoting sustainable development and improvements to active travel connections from Tansley to Matlock by providing key pedestrian and cycle routes to shops, services, facilities and schools to ensure safe and suitable travel for residents. And by that we meant off-road cycleways. The cycleways are already there in the Derbyshire County Council cycleway map, but they need improvement to make them usable by ordinary cyclists rather than by people who like taking their life into their hands. The second was contributions towards improvement to public transport by providing more frequent bus services to and from Tansley. We were presented with evidence that demonstrated that the bus service to Tansley is quite inappropriate if you want to go anywhere other than Matlock, and it is only just reasonable for, well, I would think it was unreasonable even for Matlock. Therefore, and as a result of that, of the comments from a resident, we insisted on improvements to bus transportation in Tansley to accommodate the additional numbers of school children and residents who do not have cars getting to Matlock and getting to hospitals in Chesterfield or Sheffield or Derby, or going to Alfreton. And I think so. We have taken into consideration comments from residents in particular in those two particular ways. Some of the other comments reinforce perhaps what were already noted by officers in terms of transport and provision of water or waste services in Tansley. And there are policies associated with those under DS13, which is about land at Jack Hill Farm. So yes, there are changes as a result of input from residents in Tansley, and I'm sure that is true, as Roger said, in Darley Dale and in other parts of the district as well. Certainly it is true of Ashbourne.
Thank you. Colleagues, we're getting very close to 8:30. This is a point at which we need to vote to extend the meeting. I would hope that we could actually have a 10-minute adjournment, but for that to happen, I need to see a proposer and a seconder again, please. Sorry, to extend for 30 minutes after that. Yes, yeah. Councillor Dobbs and Councillor Wilton. Thank you, and all those in favour, please show. So we will break for 10 minutes and then we will extend for half an hour after that to 10 minutes past 9. Thanks. I was keeping it.
I managed to fill my time without doing I mean, maybe that's why I should go back to schools are all cutting language.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't think Anthony Jones.
They're not running French.
No.
The new one next year. For any language. Yeah, it's outrageous. I didn't realise that. There was a campaign that music.
Thank you. So we're resuming the meeting. I think all councillors are back in their seats, and thank you, members of the public, for staying on as well, and indeed those of you listening and watching at home also. So we're still in questions at the moment, and I believe Councillor Martin Burford, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. If I can remember it, yes. Apologies to our officers. I've got quite a slightly awkward question, I suppose, really. Are they in a position to assess very, very approximately the number of dwellings on multiple sites which officers have inspected through the assessment process and rejected as being unsuitable, unattainable, or whatever, compared to the ones that are on the list tonight, on the list in the draft local plan for consideration tonight? And secondly, can you just confirm that the only sites that are being considered are those submitted by developers and landowners?
Thank you for your question. In terms of the statistics of how many sites we've assessed, what were successful and what haven't been successful, we'd have to come back to you on that, I'm afraid. It's in the hundreds, yeah. In terms of your second question, in order to have a site proposed as an allocation in the local plan, we need to be able to demonstrate that it is deliverable, and that includes awareness that the landowner is willing to release the site. So yes, they are sites that have been suggested to us or promoted by landowners and developers and agents, yeah.
Did you have another question, or was that? Okay, 2 in 1, fine. Councillor Ripton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just very quickly. And one of the speakers talked about the sensitivity, ecological sensitivity of one of the sites. And I think only last week the government changed its national risk register with regards to ecological or biodiversity collapse and ecological collapse. I'm just interested in how the planning system and the planning inspector treats such sensitive sites, and whether you could just give us a sense of how that kind of feedback is dealt with.
Thank you, Councillor. So in the site assessment work, we will take an account of designations particularly and information that we've got available to us in terms of assessing those sites. I think in the case of the site that's been talked about by members of the public this evening, I don't recall there being any statutory designations or particular information that would suggest that there are a reason not to bring forward the site. I would caveat that and say that there are policies in the plan to ensure that, particularly in terms of biodiversity net gain, that they are achieved through development, so that development ensures that it doesn't leave the site in a worse place from a biodiversity point of view than it was before the development started. And in some cases, we're able to go above national guidance, national policy on that, and on some of the sites we were aiming to achieve 20%. And the policies as well will require ecological assessments be undertaken as part of planning applications, which will guide layouts and the detail around the development. And there is other legislation as well around protected species, which developers can't ignore either.
Okay. Are there any final questions? Councillor Lees.
Just one quick one, Chair. When this goes to the inspector, does he look at the airfield industrial estate site that's already started? Does he look into the aspect of how many houses have already been sold on that development, or whether they're selling or not? You know, as a needs basis, does he look at that, or is that a separate, already started sort of thing?
Yeah, so the inspector will consider all of the sites in terms of their deliverability, and will want to examine whether they can be brought forward. And I think the fact that development has started on that site shows that there is an interest from a house builder, and permissions are in place that show there is willing. And to get a planning consent in place costs an awful lot of money nowadays. So it's a pretty good sign that development will happen. Now, it may not be happening particularly fast at the moment. That's not unusual of a site the scale of the airfield site, because there's a huge amount of infrastructure that needs to go in up front. And what we tend to see is that delivery will start off slow, and then we'll get higher and higher, or go faster and faster through the course of that delivery on site, often with multiple outlets operating where different products can be sold to maximise delivery in terms of the market.
So does the same apply then for the industrial side of it as well, the employment side?
Yes, it does. So the inspectors as well, from, you know, it's not just all about housing. We'll also look at those other allocations as well, and we'll want to be reassured that there is a good chance that those sites will come forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, Matt, you've done a few of these in the past and whatever. How realistic is it for the inspector to sort of take on board some of the points that are well made tonight? What's the likelihood of him actually, you know, striking things out of the plan?
My experience of inspectors is that they do genuinely listen to members of the public and consider the representations that have been made. An examination I was in fairly recently, a particular member of the public made and attended the examination and made a lot of responses around the green network, and that led to a lot of changes to the plan. So you know, I think I can hopefully reassure those in the gallery and those watching online that it is important to make your comments and make them through this consultation period, and they will be taken account of by the inspector.
Matt, do you have any sort of recommendations on how people should present their arguments? Should they get some professional advice? If there's I was just thinking about one or two of the villages there. Would it add to their case if they were to get them presented in a professional way in writing?
Typically, I'd say no. I think, you know, make your comments in accordance with the guidance that we'll give you. The comments have to be about the soundness of the plan, and the consultation will explain what that means and how you can frame your comments to make sure they are about soundness. I wouldn't suggest or recommend that anyone needs to go out and appoint a planning consultant. They do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But your comments and your views are equally as valid as anyone else's.
Thank you. I mean, I've just got a question as well, actually, if I may. I'll just find the right page. Apologies. Yes, it relates to the recommendations. I think it's been pointed out before. There's a couple of documents which we're still awaiting. We know about the design code, but there's the finalisation of the sustainability appraisal and the habitats regulation assessment. It says and remaining evidence base. Could you just identify what the remaining evidence base is, please?
Thank you, Chair. So a number of pieces of the evidence have already been seen by the local plans committee, and a number of those, following comments from the committee, we've asked for those pieces of evidence to be updated. So we're just awaiting those final versions of those. In terms of what they are, I think I've got a list. Just bear with me. So I think it's the level 2 SFRA, which is the strategic flood risk assessment, the transport evidence, viability evidence, work on in relation to new settlements, and then the essay, the ID. So the IDP is before you tonight. It is a draft, and again we've already sent some comments back around some updates to that. So then, yes, we're waiting the final IDP, and then the essay and the HRA, which is the Habitats Regulation Assessment and the Sustainability Appraisal.
Okay, but you can reassure us that none of those will make a material impact on the nature of the main document?
No, they won't. No, I mean, the majority of the changes and the updates from that the Local Plans Committee have picked up typically are typographical or punctuation, make it better English, make things clearer, or asking for more clarity on certain things, Chair. So we're confident there'll be nothing coming out of those pieces of evidence that amend the plan. In fact, we have received this afternoon the final essay in HRA, and whilst we haven't been able to read it fully, we've been able to review that, and they've taken on board the comments that we had on the draft as well. So we're confident that they have been taken account of and are have been represented in the local plan that's before you tonight.
Okay, thank you. I think there's something important to stress to everybody here and who's watching again, that when you are putting in your comments, the word evidence is critical here, isn't it? So your statements have to be backed up with things which are robust and are objective and not purely subjective comments. I think it's fair to put in a subjective comment. Emotional statements do have a weight, but they would need to be backed up by something which is classed as evidential as well, I think, if you want. Yeah.
Yes, Chair, and I think in terms of the Regulation 19, we've talked about the soundness tests, and I think I'll just read those out, and members of the public can go away and look at that in more detail. But plans are sound if they are positively prepared, if they're justified, i.e. by evidence, and if they're effective. So can they be delivered over that plan period? And are they consistent with national policy? So this will be set out in the guidance, but they're the sort of things that when responding, have in mind when preparing your response.
Councillor O'Brien.
Chair, just to follow up with a reassurance on your question on the remaining pieces of evidence, the council has taken a previous decision that they need to be signed off by the chair and Vice Chair of the Local Plan Committee, and I think our officer will confirm that we certainly won't sign those off unless we're 100% happy with them.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions, members. We now move to the stage where we're into debate. Can I see a proposer for the set of 6 recommendations that we have here? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Esther and Matt for the very clear way you've set out the detail of what we're considering here this evening and the way in which you have answered the questions put to you by members. You've made it very clear, it's been made very clear to us what the implications of not having a new up-to-date local plan are. Essentially, in layperson's terms, there would be anarchy in the development industry. And all the fears and concerns that have been expressed by members of the public here this evening would undoubtedly come to pass. That would be the consequence of not having an up-to-date local plan. But it has to be a local plan that meets the challenges and obligations that we as a council have been faced with from the government
It has to be one that helps deliver our corporate objectives, and it has to be one that respects the aspirations of our local communities. Now, that is something of a Bermuda Triangle. And we, the council, are sitting right in the middle of that vortex. And it does seem that whichever course we chart, we run into a peril. So preparing this local plan has been far from an easy task for our officers and for the members of the council. In moving the recommendations 1 to 6, I do so because I personally am confident that we have a plan which is fit for purpose. I understand that from what we hear this evening, not all members of the public here this evening will agree with that. And that is the purpose of the public consultation we're now asking this council to approve. If that consultation shows that we can make the plan better, that the plan can be made better with the suggestions that come forward, I'm sure this council will look to take those on board in the recommendations it makes to the planning inspector when the draft plan is submitted. That is the sort of responsible listening council that we are. We've had a number of criticisms over the years of the way in which we don't stand up to the government, particularly in terms of the housing numbers. I just want to say a point on that. We have been faced with a very intransigent neighbour in the Peak District National Park Authority, and their policy, it seems to me, of preserving half the district in Aspic. Now that has meant that we have been faced, or we could have been faced, with having to find land for another 1,500 dwellings, 1,500 in addition to those which we have already looked at finding. And you can imagine the impact that that additional 1,500 would have placed on the situation we're faced with. But as a council, we have resolutely said we are not prepared to accept that. And if that comes up at the inquiry with the planning inspector, we will continue to defend that position. And over the past 3 years, I think members of the local plan committee will back me in saying we seem to have talked about little else than housing numbers. But our plan is much more than that. If you read it carefully, it is about communities. It's about sustainable communities with the infrastructure, physical, educational and social that helps them to thrive. And if you want to see some changes that are now incorporated in the plan, that is the basis of those changes that as councillors, all of you have insisted are made. We've insisted that we have housing where we have new housing development, that we have social housing that's accessible and affordable for local families. Outside of where we're going to see new development, we will be protecting our countryside, our green environment and our rivers. We'll be encouraging local business and enterprise, and we're looking to reduce the need to rely on the use of the private car for local travel. We have a design code to ensure that all new development respects and reflects the unique character of our towns and villages. And the very real challenges we face from climate change are addressed and mitigated. We're now putting our local plan out for public consultation, probably the most important part of the process of preparing any plan. And I want to thank all those members of the public who have come here this evening to express their views, and to all those members of the public who have attended local plan meetings over the past 3 years. Whatever may have been said here this evening, your contribution has been invaluable. We approach the consultation with an open mind. we acknowledge the need for change is often difficult to understand and accept. And I, for one, look forward to listening to the views of our local communities over the next 2 months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do I see a second, Councillor Hughes?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to second this, the recommendations in the officer's report. I'd also like to express my thanks and gratitude to officers who have reacted really very rapidly and with incredible vigor to the situation we found ourselves in last November, when we were faced with the retirement of our previous planning officer who was responsible for the local plan. And since then, those officers and Matt as a consultant have realised our objective of bringing this plan to this council, well, just 1 week late. But I mean, given the timescales, I think they've done a wonderful job. In terms of the responses from the community, what hasn't been mentioned really this evening are the meetings that Peter and I attended with parish councils and others to discuss the local plan at an earlier stage. So from the beginning of this year, we went out to a number of different parish councils and a community group here in Matlock to review the current state of this new plan and to seek their opinions about it. And those opinions have been used subsequently, have been communicated to officers, they've been recorded. They're on the response, the outcome from that consultation is on the website, and it has been an important part of the overall development of this local plan. And we look forward, as Peter said, to continuing that involvement from the public and from the parish councils over the next 3 or 4 months. Our corporate plan has a vision of thriving communities in a sustainable and thriving environment. That's been the driver for the local plan. That vision is the driver for this local plan. It has been, the thriving communities have been a driver for revision to policies to make communities more inclusive, or development more inclusive for children, young adults, old people, disabled people, and particularly those who cannot drive. So many of our communities are faced with, people are faced with difficulties because they have no access to transport. And we want to overcome those problems through this local plan. Thriving communities have been a driver for infrastructure and service requirements. A community requires services to be sustainable, to thrive. And you will see in the policies associated with the new sites that are proposed, particularly the larger sites like Jack Hill Farm, like Darley Moor, we have expressed strong requirements that need to be satisfied by developments on those sites in order to provide thriving and sustainable communities. We have toiled over green corridors and the natural environment and the policies associated with those. We've toiled over separation of communities to enable those communities to maintain their identity. So one example is the gap between Darley-Dale and Matlock, but there are many others in Derbyshire Dales, and we hope and anticipate that the separation between those communities will be enhanced by this local plan. We have had developed a design code for the district which identifies the different shapes and characteristics of settlements and attempts to codify those for architects the architects of new developments. These changes and additions, we hope, will lead to thriving and sustainable communities and a built and natural landscape that it itself is thriving and sustainable. We were faced with a major change during the development of this policy. We had a change in government, and the change in government resulted in a change in housing policy and housing targets. So we have proposed a new settlement to take pressure off the market towns and larger villages. Policies for this new settlement support it as a new community, one that itself thrives and is sustainable in a way that building around existing settlements may not be able to achieve. So it will require, as somebody said, new infrastructure, but the scale of the development around market towns and larger villages would also require new infrastructure to be built there. And that, in some ways, may be more difficult. So we are proposing a new settlement. The changing housing targets have also meant that we have introduced a stepped approach to housing targets, a gradually increasing build rate through the plan period, which allows development to be scaled up and ensuring our 5-year housing supply is kept to a feasible level. And we avoid development on a tilted balance approach, which is what we have at the moment. The new development and the stepped approach are changes from the existing policy that make it future-proof and take away the threat of this tilted balance. But the timescales for infrastructure provision and assembling a development project for the new settlement means that we would still need to rely on sites close to market towns and villages for several years, which is why those are in the plan as well. So we're anticipating the new settlement will take about 10 years to come to fruition. And in the meantime, at lower levels of housing build, we will be using the sites around the market towns and villages. Returning to our vision, we have written policies for the larger sites and their neighbourhoods into the plan. These will help to ensure that they are built with the infrastructure and services necessary for them to be part of a thriving community. Our aim has been to make existing communities more sustainable through development. Over the last few days, weeks and months, I have received comments, mostly negative, from residents and councils about sites in the local plan. To residents, I have said that these sites are ones that are already being considered for development. The local plan therefore provides safeguards and requirements for that development. If we don't have a local plan, those safeguards will not be there. Development will still take place, but will not necessarily meet the requirements that we have specified in the plan. To councillors, I have said the same thing. But I have also said that as councillors, we have a duty to all residents in Derbyshire Dales, not just those in our ward or in an adjacent ward. It is in our code of conduct. The plan will help safeguard Derbyshire Dales. Without it, we will get more unstructured development, infrastructure is less likely to be planned, and the measures to maintain and develop our thriving communities will not necessarily be present. To me, this plan, as always, a compromise between what we want and what can be achieved given national policy and the propensity of developers is essential for Derbyshire Dales and that area in the larger unitary authority to which it will be a part. I therefore ask you to support this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I'm aware that we're coming up to half an hour after our break. I believe as chair I have the ability to ask for, in fact, request or require an extension for half an hour without going to a vote. Given that we are only entering into debate now, that's precisely what I propose we do. So we are extending for another half hour. Who would like to speak in debate? Councillors Burfeet, one of you. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I thank the members of the public and reps from parish councils who've spoken tonight raised questions and made very good points, and those who've responded online as well with their points. In fact, I should remind everyone that I was one of you for many years when I was a town council before I was on the district council. So I know how you all feel when you're making representations about things like this. I do appreciate the council's dilemma, given the impossible challenge from the last, is it the last Labour or present Labour government, to build many more houses in less than half the district council's area. Therefore, it's inevitable that many greenfield sites will have to be built on, given that the largest sites, apart from Darley Moor, which is fairly long term, and the former Ashbourne airfield, are former quarries, remediation of which requires external funding, hopefully from MPV, I believe now, it's the East Midlands Combined County Authority, in order to remediate. But they remain priorities to develop as brownfield sites. Also, of course, priorities for employment use as well. Although all sites are open to challenge in terms of location, landscape impact, lack of services and infrastructure, etc., mostly fleshed out in the methodology assessment. But as ever, in Derbyshire Dales, it's highway implications and water supply and drainage, foul and surface water, which is so often inadequate or overlooked, with poor support from, I regret to say, Derbyshire County Council highways. Concern about Ashbourne airfield site, over 1,000 dwellings, I share those reservations, because there's only one access and no separate egress from that site. So it's a lot of houses with only one point of access. So I remain, vehicle access that is, so I remain concerned about this, and that too many of the sites proposed for allocation are accessed off the equivalent of country lanes, sometimes even less than that. Unfortunately, highways never seem to insist on the necessary improvements to be carried out and implemented by developers, not by the public purse, prior to occupation of any new dwellings. Improvements must include widening of narrow access roads and junctions, etc., in order to comply with adoptable highway standards, complete with drainage measures and lighting and proper footways where appropriate. The housing allocations I'm most familiar with include Tanseywood Mills on the edge of Matlock, but actually in Tansley Parish, which is accessed off a substandard road of varying width, still unadopted, with a very poor junction with the A615 above Matlock Green, and likewise another adopted lane, a very narrow steep one, with an absolutely appalling blind junction in onto the A615 as well. This situation, I was involved in debate about this, but was rejected by this county council over 20 years ago as it being inadequate. So nothing's changed in the last 20 years. So somebody must pay or take responsibility for making this road fit for adoption by the county council. Therefore, does the methodology used take seriously the matter of infrastructure, off-site infrastructure, replicated many times throughout this district, including the site on Snitterton Road, for instance, above Sainsbury's, which is open to multiple objections, to be earmarked within the planning process in due course, but again accessed off another substandard lane of varying width. Finally then, I also appreciate the efforts made by, as other members have said, Matt Bowers and Esther Lindley and their team, as well as Councillors Peter O'Brien and David Hughes, and a very impressive policy document, which is very long, as you can see when it's on paper. It's about 600 pages. It's too much to absorb in a short time, particularly in a week. Of course, those objections are going to be earmarked within the planning process in due course, no doubt, if this goes ahead. But again, accessed via another substandard lane, and all of them are like that. So I appreciate the efforts that have been made, but I remain very concerned about what I consider and anticipate will be serious repercussions of failed infrastructure for our residents. Unfortunately, we're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. If we reject this draft plan tonight and fail to submit it to the Secretary of State, we'll be penalised by the government and developers will have a field day. So finally then, very finally, I'm reluctantly going to support this tonight, but I can see what the objections are, but we've not really no alternative but to approve it.
Councillor Sue Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say a little bit, repeat what Martin said. We don't consult each other all the time, do we, about what we're going to
Not
say?
on this, no.
Not on this. So I'll start with the thank yous, as Martin has said, to the officers and to Councillor O'Brien and Hughes. That must have, for all of you, that is a mammoth task. But I have listened carefully to what's been said, and absolutely understand the frustration of speakers tonight. I share their frustration. They know their communities. They feel threatened by this plan. They care for their communities. And I'm also frustrated at how the whole system operates. We've had an unreasonable number of how the housing target is an unreasonable number of houses, and it's been foisted on us. Let's be clear about that. I would also just go along with what Councillor O'Brien said about the Peak Park. Now, Martin used to work for the Peak Park, and we have endless arguments about the Peak Park, because I agree that the Peak Park seems to want to keep itself in Aspic. If we're not careful, it's going to end up as some kind of old folks' home. It's probably halfway there now, because young people can't afford to buy property there. So I would like, if I could, I'd like to remove some of these sites in this local plan right now, right here, right now, but we can't. So what I would say is I would urge objectors to put their views forward to the inspector, but the views have to be backed up by evidence, clear evidence as to what their objections are, and I hope that they will do that. Finally, it just seemed to me, and I think Martin said this, and other people have probably said it as well, that if we don't have a local plan, it's going to be a free-for-all for developers, and I do not want to see that. So, again, please, objectors, send in your objections with sound evidence to the inspector, and let's hope for the outcome on that we want to see. So I'll leave it at that. I will reluctantly, I've got to vote for this. It's sticking in my throat to say that, but I will. No choice.
Councillor Archer.
Thanks, Chair. I share a lot of what Councillor Burford just said, actually, but I really hope that people watching this tonight understand that councillors who vote in favour of tonight's recommendations are not necessarily declaring support for the proposed potential sites in this plan. We're voting for a consultation that is essential if we are to remain legally compliant and sound in terms of the planning process, and to avoid us being extremely vulnerable to speculative development, which would result in us having fewer safeguards over developments that do happen. I personally do have faith in the local plan committee and the officers who've worked on this. I know how hard they've worked, and I believe they have been given an impossible task due to the overbearing housing targets imposed on them. So my hope is that the consultation that we put out results in the national government gaining an actual awareness of the local restrictions that we have in the Dales. And this pressure ultimately results in that we have in our local area results in a small number of areas, largely around Ashbourne, taking an overbearing amount of housing. That will hopefully result in a change to the housing targets. If it does not, and we have to approve this plan after minor alterations and mitigations, which could happen after this consultation, I'll be honest, I hope that some of the proposals and developments proposed in this plan fail at planning. We know that could happen. It happened with the Wolds recently. I'd also, as well as talking about housing, just want a quick comment here about the traveller sites as well. I want to place on record that although we've got 2 traveller sites in the plan, this does not solve our traveller site problem. We must continue to actively look for more appropriate traveller sites with greater distance from residents. Thanks.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'm going to echo a lot of what's already been said by members there. I think we need a local plan. We need to have some things around it. And I think there's sort of the same amorphous thing of speculative building that we put out there. And I think that is all of the things that you've heard about and seen in the plan would happen, but without any control around it, with a lack of control for pushing towards affordable housing, some of the work that these great guys have put together, and it would be out of control. we've still got measures to come forward, and I think a lot of the members of the public here came here tonight hoping that this would be a one-stop shop where we could solve it all and that'll be it. But if you've still got issues, and they are valid issues, then bring them to us. Bring them, whether that's through this process, through consultation. Hold us to account. We're your members. That's what we're here for. Hold us to account for this. If it's not working, get us to help it to work. And I think just in response to Ashbourne as well, we did actually change a bit of the bypass as well. So to include and consider the quiet lanes, to have that extra bypass in by removing the western description of it. So it could be east or west as part of that, to help the quiet lanes there. Because I think one of the things we really need to do when we come to planning in the future is infrastructure. I just wrote highways, because how much of the discussion tonight has been around the problems we've had with highways. And again, we need to push back on that. We need to challenge county to get better, come to the table. That would be the good part, let alone anything else. And the same for the lead local flood authority as well. Hold these guys to account. They're impacting all of these decisions that you guys are talking here. And pretty much most of you have said, we understand stuff's got to happen, but we've just got no understanding around what that infrastructure impact is going to be to that. And we need to give that. We need to do that, be better at it, I think, going forward. I think to go back to Peter's comment on sailing, fail we may, sail we must.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to what my colleagues have said, but I've taken more note of what the members of the public and the parish councils have said. You know, one of the things somebody said was common sense hasn't been very common this evening. And we talk about we're going to listen in future. We've had consultations already to get to this stage, and these places are still in. Councillor Hughes spoke about Tansley and the cycle route and the bus route. What about these 18 tankers of water that come? What about the sewage issues? It's about the number of houses. I will not be supporting this.
Do we have any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Butler.
Well, I will be supporting this. And on the topic, but ever so slightly off, on the number 10's petition site at the moment, there is an option to sign up for making water companies statutory consultees on applications for planning. So if people want to start tackling the failure of our infrastructure and the way we are failing as a local district to manage that, we really need to start being able to apply some control and make some demands of the water companies. So I will be supporting this, and if anyone's got a moment, feel free to have a word on number 10's petitions and see if we can get some statutory consultees actually in this room dealing with sewage.
Yes, many people will be surprised that's not already the case, of course, but yeah. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hobson, I presume the consequence would be you're happy to stay with the 2017 plan, which of course you voted for back in 2017. I would just like to highlight one or two things that are direct consequences of the 2017 plan. A significant majority of all the houses being proposed in this plan in Ashbourne come from the 2017 plan. The lack of a more substantive mitigation of the traffic implications of that, they didn't think beyond the Blenheim Relief Road, the Blenheim Road extension, in the 2017 plan. The 2017 plan has such no teeth policies on flooding that things that would seem to us to be common sense and to be members of the public to be common sense, we cannot quote the current local plan as a reason for refusal. Just, it isn't there. You need to look at the new one and what the new policies in that area. It's in the page, hang on, bear with me, PD8, page 75, much more teeth. If one of the excellent bits of this local plan is the infrastructure development plan, it's got one or two little things that need to be tweaked, but it's fantastic. Not only is it many pages, it's 211 to 389, 389 in 211 pages of what they're going to do for infrastructure defined in this local plan. It needs tweaking. There's some numbers where it says unknown, but this is real amounts of money going towards infrastructure associated with certain developments. Did we get that in Ashbourne from the 2017 plan? I don't notice it. In fact, it's quite useful if you look in the same document, page 329 in the agenda pack. It actually shows where community facilities are in Ashbourne, or where is within 800 metres of a community facility. And there's this great gap for most of Ashbourne. That's what came from the 2017 plan. What have we got in this plan? We've got provision for that sort of thing and health centres and allocated amounts of money. It's there. We've got to move on to this. There is just, it's crazy to hang on to an existing plan which is completely toothless. It can be totally ignored by a planning inspector because it's out of date. What in heaven's name is the point of that? I do recommend this plan. Thank you, Chair.
I don't. Oh, Councillor Linthwaite.
I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Dobbs has just mentioned in terms of the infrastructure development plan. A group of us were at a meeting 2 or 3 months ago now with Severn Trent, and one of the things that the gentleman there was talking about was this infrastructure development plan, and he was waiting for it. Severn Trent have to put their 5 years ahead investment plans through Ofwat, and they have to be approved by Ofwat for the next 5 years. And up to now, because they are not a statutory consultee, they had no idea what developments were coming down the line and what infrastructure they were going to be expected to supply. This document, this one document alone, gives Severn Trent something to work on, and they have literally been waiting for it, because it gives them an outline of what they may be expected to provide. They can start planning, and that includes holding tanks for Tansley, the tanks in Matlock that they're already planning, that sort of thing. So, you know, we can all complain about Severn Trent, but to give them their due, they have been desperately waiting for this guidance, because without it, they are just fishing in the dark all the time. So, you know, even for that reason alone, I would recommend this plan. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're back to you, Peter, Councillor O'Brien, to sum up as the proposer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you to all those colleagues, members who've made contributions during the debate. They're clearly heartfelt. This is quite a momentous occasion this evening. It's been a long, difficult journey preparing this plan. It's not finished, but now we're at a point where we are proposing to agree a draft local plan to go out to consultation. Back at the end of November 2025, I don't think those of us who were involved closely with the preparation of the local plan imagined we would get to this point today, but we have. I want to echo formally some of the thanks that have been made here this evening. First of all, to all the local councils that Councillor Hughes and I have met during the past 2 or 3 months, who've made a major contribution to the plan. That's Ashbourne, Darley-Dale and Matlock Town Councils, Roseley, Hullenwald, Doveridge, Brailsford and Ediston, Carsington and Hopton, Tansley, Ediston and Wyerson Parish Councils. Thank you for your contribution. And Matlock Civic Association. Councillor Susan Hobson, particularly in her role as a county councillor representing the Derwent division. Our leadership, our administration leadership, for the confidence they place in the local plan committee to take this project forward. And the local plan committee itself, who've worked so well together as a team. David Chapman, Martin Burfoot, Roger Shelley, Dermot Murphy, Lucy Peacock, Matt Butler, Anthony Bates and Peter Dobbs. And Gareth G, if you're listening or watching, we don't have the pleasure of your group on the committee, but I can assure you your thoughts were never far from our minds. There's one member of the committee I have a special debt of gratitude to. That's David Hughes. And I can honestly say, David, that I can't imagine a better, more constructive and supportive vice chair. You'll know that our local plan includes the proposal for a new settlement, a garden community, a proposal that is vital if we are to meet our new housing requirements whilst maintaining the character of our towns and villages. And something which, in my opinion, could well go down in the future as one of this council's most significant achievements in its history. Without David's drive and enthusiasm and commitment, this simply would not have happened. He overcome the initial doubts and scepticism with informed and expertly presented evidence in the way that probably only he can. So thank you, David. And of course, our officer team. Only they will know how they survived the staffing crisis they faced last December and cope with what at times must have felt were impossible demands of myself and perhaps other colleagues. They produced what I consider to be a really excellent end product in our draft local plan. So Claire, Emily, Matt, who joined the team as a consultant, probably not knowing what he was letting himself in for, Anna, Steve, and especially Esther Lindley, who's led the team over the past 8 months. Thank you. And when I mentioned the officer team and the debt of gratitude we owe them, yes, it is a team effort. But one person stands out, and that is Esther Lindley. Esther's led the team in the most difficult of circumstances, not least having to deal with me as chair of the local plan committee. She's done so with a smile and a level of professionalism which is a credit to her, her family, and to the council. So Esther, it gives me great pleasure to present it to you as a personal token of my appreciation.
Thank you, Peter. In which case, I think we're getting to the stage where we can move to a vote. I mean, I would just like to reiterate many of the words that you've heard. Oh, Councillor Lees, would you like to speak?
Yes, could I request a recorded vote, please?
Of course, yes. But I would just like to say that yes, this is, for all of us, this is a once in a 10 or 15 year opportunity. It's not every day that a local plan revision comes round. So please do treat this seriously. Sometimes we don't necessarily appear that we are. There's a sort of gallows humour involved in being on a committee like this, I think. But nevertheless, the points that you make and many other people have made to us outside of these meetings have registered. Don't doubt that. If you don't believe me, then the challenge to you is to help us to improve this by taking it one step further and making sure that the submissions that you've put together already and anything else you want to go to the government inspector. We will see those as well, but crucially, they will also, and you've heard how they are independent of the council, and they will take into account evidence-based evidence. I think that's all I want to say. So we have a request for a recorded vote. Needs a proposer and a second. A proposer for yourself and a second from Councillor Hobson. Thank you. John, over to you.
So the recorded vote for agenda item 5, recommendations 1 to 6. Councillor Archer.
For.
Councillor Bates. Councillor Boynton. Councillor Martin Burfoot. Councillor Sue Burfoot. Councillor Butcher.
4.
Councillor Buttle.
4.
Councillor Dobbs.
4.
Councillor Franks.
4.
Councillor Hobson. Councillor Hughes.
4.
Councillor Lees.
Against.
Councillor Linthwaite.
4.
Councillor Melstrom. Councillor Murphy.
4.
Councillor Nash.
4.
Councillor O'Brien.
4.
Councillor Peacock,
4.
Councillor Ripton,
4.
Councillor Shelley,
4.
and Councillor Wilton.
4.
Eighteen for, 2 against, and 1 abstention.
So thank you, members. That's clearly carried to go forward to consultation in August. And as I say, that will appear on the website and through other means as well. Thank you, members. We're back again tomorrow night for a second crack this week. So I look forward to seeing you all then again. And thank you to everybody else who's attended tonight and who's been watching.